Deacon. Sakari.
We are the children of the one Yahweh.
The chosen.
Ye are the chosen of the one Yahweh. And he has given his laws to us. Now everything belongs to us. We above all nations, all nations.
What?
Above all nations, all nations.
Yeah.
We are the chosen of the one Yahweh. Above all nations.
We above, we ain't equal, tell the judge. This is legal, only love to my people. They my cuz, they my amigos. Don't shed blood, don't do evil, don't do drugs, don't do needles. Who I was, this the sequel, I don't mug. Keep it peaceful, all the nations, they below. They be hating on the low, still waiting on my flow. I be making lots of dough, I hit Satan with a blow. All you masons gotta go, we debating on my show. I ain't faking, I'm a pro. Look, we was in the wilderness, heavenly bread. Broke the commandments, now we the tail instead of the head. Till Christ come back and start resurrecting the dead. Glorious garments dipped in blood, looking redder than red. Yeah. When you rain missiles like a thunder shower, they die by millions when you come Yahweh. When you reveal and give your son the power, we are the children of the one Yahweh.
We are the children of the one Yahweh. Ye are the chosen of the one Yahweh. And he has given his laws to us. Now everything belongs to us. We above all nations, all nations. Above all nations, all nations. We are the chosen of the one Yahweh. Above all nations.
They know we the chosen, see, Israel where we supposed to be. I don't rock no rosary, Sakari always close to me. I express it vocally, identity they stole from me. Oppressing us socially, spreading wickedness globally. Taking crafty counsel, they some nasty scoundrels. Need to go back to the caves, make me go back to my ways. He gave his laws to us, but you say in God we trust. They like the evil phantom, this is the Hebrew anthem. Yeah, how what paid the ransom? I just blessed my Abba's throne, and I be in my bag. I just caught a zone, my brother's right behind me, so you know I'm not alone. I know we can do this quicker with my sister Shasha Jones. We just keep it moving and brewing, waking up Yasharala. Watching out for the haters and fakers and the imposters. Showing love to my people, so I gotta put on for us. We rule the world, and everything belongs to us.
We are the children of the one Yahweh. Ye are the chosen of the one Yahweh. And he has given his laws to us. Now everything belongs to us. We above all nations, all nations. Above all nations, all nations. We are the chosen of the one Yahweh. Above all nations. All nations. So we're above all nations.
Well, all right, brothers and sisters. All right, what's going on? What's going on? Hey, man. Today's so-called Thanksgiving, and for us, it's just another day in captivity, right? So, you know, I just decided to come to you, brothers and sisters, the few of you guys that are here, and just go over some history with you guys, and everybody else can catch it later. It's kind of an impromptu class. The class wasn't planned, so I give all praise, honor, and glory to the Most High for those of you guys that are able to join. And for those of you that will see this later, I'm hoping you guys are edified, right? I'm not going to go along with a long introduction today. We're going to get right into the lesson, and then I'm going to get out of here. All right. I see I got the Elder Zahab on the line with me. So if he wants to say something really quickly before we get started, the floor is yours.
Hey, Shalom, family. All praise to the Most High, man. Just keep this day as a memorial, man. Remember our brothers and sisters from the tribe of Gad. Also, the 10 tribes were here because it's not only Gad who was in North America, man. You know what I'm saying? You got Robert Wan, aka Reuben. You got other tribes, and it was massacred, man. You know, so just this day is in memorial for our brothers and sisters who was massacred. And these heathens talk about giving thanks, but it's all right. Like the book of Lamentation says, man, this cup is gonna pass from us and it's gonna go to Esau. So just, you know, this should be a solemn day. That's it. You know, give thanks and praise to the Most High. Shalom.
Come, all praises. All right. So without further ado, guys, we're about to get started. Make sure you guys, if you're on YouTube, like the video, drop a comment, share the video to all your social media platforms. You guys that are on Clubhouse that come in, the link is at the top of the room. It's a PowerPoint. Today's lesson on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of visibility, whether you should watch it or not, as opposed to listen, is a 20. I'm going to go into a couple of books and show you guys some things. You know, we kind of read a couple of articles from encyclopedias and, you know, just share information with you brothers, especially you brothers that are teachers and you sisters. All right. So with that being said, again, if you're on Clubhouse, you click the link, come to the top of the room. I'm not going to wait too long to get started. I'm going to get started and people can file. And I know it's so-called Thanksgiving Day. I know some people have the day off. So, you know, they're in other time zones. They might still be sleeping. And a lot of people, unfortunately, work in the service industry and still have to work. So, you know, for those of you guys that are here, we're going to make it do what it do. All right. So with that being said, I'm going to share my screen and we are going to get started. Okay. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, guys. So today's lesson is never trust your enemies. From the Spaniards to the Pilgrims. Now, I did a lesson last year going into all the different pagan symbolism that's associated with Thanksgiving, which we'll probably hit again at the end of the class. But so as not to be repetitive and do the same lesson over again this year, I kind of approached the topic from a different angle. And I want to talk about the Spaniards and the Pilgrims and some of the atrocities that we know that they did in history. And why the Most High is going to make them pay and why America has to pay. And that's not something that America wants to talk about or acknowledge, but they're going to pay for what they did. Never forget that. I want to start off with a term that's been, you know, in the media a lot. I want to say over the last 6 years, between 2016 all the way now to 2024, going into 2025. It's a term called critical race theory. Now, I'm not sure how many brothers and sisters know what critical race theory is. Some of you do. Maybe there's people that don't. So we're just going to assume that nobody knows what it is. And we're going to examine what critical race theory is together and how it's related to today's topic. So let's go to the next slide. So what is critical race theory? Critical race theory is a noun because it's a thing, right? And dictionary.com says it's a set of ideas holding that racial bias is inherent in many parts of Western society, especially in its legal and social institutions. So we see racism or bias in the legal system. That's the reason why, although we make up, according to them, according to the census, only a certain small part of the population. They say that so-called African Americans, foundational Black Americans, make up 13% of the population. I believe they say it is, but yet we are the highest incarcerated of anybody. And that's due to the legal system, the way the legal system is worded and how laws are actually implemented and applied and used against our people. Remember, I taught you guys months ago that racketeering laws were introduced in the 70s because they wanted to break down the mafia. They wanted to destroy the Italian mafia. But nowadays, the majority of people that are getting hit with RICO charges is so-called foundational Black Americans mainly. And this is happening to the gang. So they take the law and they apply it against our people more than anybody. And you see the same thing on a social level when it comes to stuff like banking. On a financial level, I should say that's banking. On a social level, when it comes to redlining for houses, so forth and so on, it's encoded in the system. It's inherent in the system. That's what critical race theory is. On the basis of having been primarily designed for and implemented by white people. Yes, because the people that were at the top of this society implemented these laws through something called, well, let's come out of here for a second. Let's open up a window on Google real quick. I've shown you guys this before, but some of you guys may be new. All right, so let's look up the eugenics tree real quick. See the image. So let's use this one. This is something called, let's do this one because it's brown so you can see it better. This is something called the eugenics tree, right? I'll go to the website and see if we can get a better idea, a better image of it. I guess not. That's all right. That's all right. Let's do this. Let's see if we get a better image that way. So this is something called the eugenics tree, right? Well, this is called the anti-eugenics tree. That's not what I want. I liked it because it was in color. So let's just come to the one that we all know, right? This is the eugenics tree. And you have all these systems that work together. And a lot of these systems work together against our people. The bias is inherent on a financial level, on a social level, on a legal level. You have anatomy, biology, physiology, genetics, psychology, mental testing. A lot of our people are on a lot of medications and stuff. Our children are more likely to be diagnosed with mental issues, right? Geology, anthropology. Let's go over here. You have genealogy, statistics, medicine, surgery. Like in surgery, it's embedded in the medical system. One of the main ways it's embedded in the medical system is who's number one to get hysterectomy so that they can't have children anymore. It's our women. It's our women. So all these systems are in place, and they've been in place to help destroy our people and to keep our people down. So there's this thing called critical race theory, where you look at race critically. You look at the world, you look at all the systems, especially America, you look at all the systems that are in place, and you look at it critically and make a critical assessment, which sometimes offends people and hurts their feelings, mainly so-called white people. And so they want to get rid of this. They don't want to talk about it anymore. That's what critical race theory is. Let's go to the next. Let's watch a video really quickly and see a little bit more about what critical race theory is.
The whole purpose of critical race theory is to provide Americans with a way to understand the legacy of racism, even though those stories sometimes hurt.
It's anti-American training that vilifies white people.
So did you guys catch that? Critical race theory, which is pretty much speaking the truth. It's not based on emotions. It's not based on feelings, but it's based on facts. Well, there's a growing backlash against the truth of what so-called white people have done in history. And this election was very, very important to a lot of so-called white people. That's why a lot of them voted for Donald Trump and the numbers that they did, because one of their issues was against critical race theory. They are tired of being told their history because they know that their history is absolutely bloody, destructive, whatever adjective you want to use. They know their history is all those things and more, and they're tired of talking about it. So there was a growing backlash against critical race theory, speaking about the medical field, the financial field, the housing, whatever it is that you the legal system, whatever it is, you can go into all these systems and show how there is inherent bias against our people. You can show it. You can quantitatively show it, and they don't like that. So there was a backlash. And unfortunately, a lot of our people got caught up in that madness as well. But let's keep going.
And demands they apologize.
The best learning for students about social studies and about our democracy and our country is the learning where students can really grapple with the issues and really come to a deeper understanding of how our past informs our present.
All of this revisionist, woke curriculum, you are not going to do this to our children.
So basically what they're calling revisionist history is that people are actually going into history and showing that a lot of the things that our students are being indoctrinated in schools with is lies. Let's tell one of the most basic lies that's taught on a collegiate level, that Christopher Columbus discovered the Americas, the West Indies. That's still taught today on a collegiate level. And when people challenge that notion and speak about the inhabitants that were already here and how much more advanced they were than what the history books teaches your children, they call that revisionist history.
Teachers across the country are caught in the middle of the latest flashpoint in America's culture war, critical race theory. So what exactly is it? And why is there a push to ban it in schools?
Critical race theory is a body of ideas and a set of approaches to understanding the history and the present of American society that looks at the ways in which racial unfairness have been woven into the fabric of our institutions.
In other words, critical race theory, or CRT for short, is a legal academic framework centered on the idea that racism is systemic.
Is that a lie? Is that a lie that racism is systemic? The answer is no. It can be quantitatively demonstrated. It can be tangibly demonstrated. It's not a lie. But you have a major backlash against it. Let's go to the next slide. This video is kind of long, so we ain't got to watch it all. You guys get the idea. Let's go to the next slide. Now, I want to bring your attention because you have some Israelites, as I said before, that have been drinking the Kool-Aid. Donald Trump is your new Lord and Savior now. We know Kamala Harris was the devil, but you're not so sure if Donald Trump is the devil. He's your Lord and Savior. He's going to save America. I want to call your attention to an article from 2018 from Newsweek magazine. So the Black Israelites didn't make this up. We're just demonstrating it. From 2018, Newsweek magazine. What is the article entitled? It says, Donald Trump says, our ancestors tamed a continent. Translation, they acknowledge that people were here, but they see themselves as having come over here and tamed these people. That is true. That's what they think. And when the people that they speak about speak against it, now there's a backlash. Now there's a backlash. They don't want to hear your complaints no more about what their forefathers did. They're proud of what their forefathers did. He says, our ancestors tamed a continent. Translation, raped, robbed, and murdered this continent is what they did. And we are not going to apologize for America. You guys see that? Unapologetic. This is the same guy that 21% of so-called Black people went to the polls and voted for on November 6th because he's become your new Lord and Savior. First it was Caesar Borgia, the white Jesus, and now it's Donald Trump. But that's the real Donald Trump that a lot of people don't know. Let's watch the video.
In recent years and even decades, too many people have...
You guys are coming in on Clubhouse. I can't see. I'm not sure if there's even anybody in the room, but if you guys are, you guys should come over to YouTube if you can. The link is at the top of the room because I'm going to be showing a lot of things today, mostly demonstrating today. So let's go.
In recent years and even decades, too many people have forgotten that truth. They've forgotten that our ancestors trounced an empire, tamed a continent.
The empire that they trounced was the British Empire. And then they tamed the continent. In other words, they call themselves having tamed the Native Americans. No shame in this game saying that.
Trounced an empire, tamed a continent, and triumphed over the worst evils in history.
So they triumphed over the worst evils in history, which includes triumphing over or taming the Native Americans. Okay? Listen.
In every generation, there have been cynics and critics who try to tear down America.
By tear down, meaning you tell the truth. We don't use words like tamed a continent. We use words like rape, because that's what they did, rob, because that's what they did, and murder, because that's what they did. And so people have written books on it, academic articles, you name it, and some of those books have indeed made their way into schools. And these conversations are had in public, on broadcast media, so forth and so on. And so he calls people that speak these truths, he called them critics of America's greatness. What was so great about what they did to the Native Americans? Nothing. What's so great about what they still to this day do to the Native Americans? Nothing. But he thinks it's great.
It's not working too well lately. But in recent years, the problem grew worse. A growing number used their platforms to denigrate America's incredible heritage.
In other words, speaking on these truths, and they're tired of it. Come on.
Challenge America's sovereignty and weaken America's pride. But we know the truth, we will speak the truth, and we will defend that truth. America is the greatest fighting force for peace, justice, and freedom in the history of the world.
So then we can assume that they got this land through peaceful methods, right? Or any land that they occupy right now. They got it through peace, according to him.
And in case you haven't noticed, we have become a lot stronger lately. A lot. We are not going to apologize for America.
There it is. Unapologetic. They're unapologetic. They don't care. It's the book of Psalms, chapter 58, verse 1. It says, "Do ye indeed speak righteousness, O congregation? Do ye judge uprightly, O ye sons of men?" Verse 2, "Yea, in heart ye work wickedness. Ye weigh the violence of your hands in the earth," which is what America has done. Which is what America has done. "The wicked are estranged from the womb, and they go astray as soon as they be born, speaking lies. Their poison is like the poison of a serpent." That's their philosophies. That's their religion. That's their history books. That's their education system. It is poison. It's poisonous. And it's poisoned the mind of many of their people. And it's also poisoned the mind of many of our people, especially the religion and especially the education system. It has poisoned us. But many people, through the advent of social media and the proliferation of information, many people are beginning to wake up out of sleep. And they don't like it. They don't like it. They are like the death adder that stop at their ear. When people bring these things to them, they call them critics. They say you hate America for telling the truth. They don't want to hear what their forefathers did to the Native Americans. They don't want to hear it no more. You black people need to stop talking about slavery. That was in the past. They don't want to hear it anymore. They don't want to hear the conversation that even though slavery was in the past, you have corporations today that are multi-billion-dollar corporations today that still benefit off of slavery. They don't want to hear it. Let's go look it up real quick. So let's look at this one right here. Let's see what this is. 15 major corporations you never knew profited from slavery. Lehman Brothers, right? It's a financial institution, still exists today. Looking at the name, more likely than not, and I haven't done the research, but looking at the name, more likely than not, small hats. If you look deep enough. Aetna, aren't they an insurance company? They benefited from slavery. But the white men don't want to hear about that. No more critical race theory. We don't care. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps. We don't want to hear it. JP Morgan Chase. Some of you brothers and sisters have bank accounts with Chase Bank. They're linked to slavery. New York Life, another insurance company. Slavery. Wachovia Corporation, which includes Wachovia Bank, which I'm not sure if it still exists. I used to see them around, but I don't see them anymore. Which is owned by Wells Fargo. Some of you brothers and sisters have bank accounts with Wells Fargo. That goes back to slavery. Fleet Bank, Fleet Boston. I skipped some because some of these I'm not familiar with, right? Maybe you're not either, but I'm using the ones that we're familiar with, right? Brown Brothers Harriman. Brooks Brothers. How about this one? For all you New Yorkers, the Barclays Bank. Hey, don't the New Jersey Nets play there in Brooklyn? The Brooklyn Nets? That's in New Jersey. The Brooklyn Nets, they play in the Barclays Center. That company has ties going all the way back to slavery. But Esau says they don't want to talk about that no more. They said that they don't apologize for that. They don't care. This is the guy that some of you brothers and sisters have made your new Lord and Savior. This guy, some of you guys are going to take the Caesar board. No, you're going to take the John F. Kennedy picture down off the wall and put his picture up instead. Some of you guys. It's ridiculous. Let's go to the next slide. So now that we know what critical race theory is, which is simply just holding America accountable for the atrocities that it has committed, your new president-elect, this is what he has to say about that, about holding them accountable. First, he said they don't apologize, but he has more to say. Let's listen.
When Republicans take back Congress, we will fight for the people of Florida, as I did always. Rick Scott will tell you, Marco will tell you, I was the first one to call, and I was saying whatever you need, and we always took care of the hurricanes, and we took care of them fast, Marco. One of the first things we must do and stand up for, and I can't even believe I have to say this, parental rights. Can you imagine we're going to stand up for the parents? Of course you're going to stand up. That we even have to say it because they are trying to destroy parents. We will get critical race theory out of our schools, out of our military, and out of every part of our federal, state, and local governments.
Did you guys catch that? They're going to get rid of critical race theory, meaning holding them accountable from the schools, state, and local governments, and the federal government. Get rid of it. We're not talking about what we did. We're going to give ourselves a clean slate. We don't want to hear it. What our foreparents did cannot be taught in schools about slavery. None of that stuff. They want to get rid of it. What we did to the Native Americans, the genocide, cannot be taught in schools. Get rid of it.
We even have to say it because they are trying to destroy parents. We will get critical race theory out of our schools, out of our military, and out of every part of our federal, state, and local governments. And at long last, every parent in America must be empowered to opt out of the forced indoctrination in the classroom.
Forced indoctrination, translation, parents are able to opt out of having their children go to school and learn the truth about what this country really did. You'll have a chance to opt out of that. This is the guy some of you guys love. All right. Now, you might be asking yourself, why do they want to ban critical race theory? For what? Well, the white man is like, well, why don't I make it illegal to teach true history so that they don't wake up, the Israelites? I want to take you guys to a book that I have. We're going to do a little bit of reading out of this book today. More than a little bit of reading. We're probably going to read about maybe 8 pages. But it's good. It's good. So that we can learn some things together. So this is a book I have called Stolen Continents, right? The America Through the Indians' Eyes Since 1492. Now, we know so-called Thanksgiving wasn't implemented until the early 1600s. So this is maybe like 150 years before that, right? It's going back 150 years, all the way to 1492. This is the date that they say that Columbus and his so-called men discovered the Americas. So let's start with page number 13, Discovery. And we're going to read all the highlighted portion, but especially the bottom. It says, why were Amerindians so vulnerable? Vulnerable to what? Being conquered. Why? Why was America so overwhelmed by Europe that, unlike Asia and Africa, it has never been decolonized? Why are the modern countries of America not really American at all, but imitations Europeans built on American soil? Why does none use an American language at the diplomatic level? Why isn't there a single president, prime minister, or monarch with an Amerindian name? The usual answers, like that retailed in Harper's by Mario Vargas Llosa, are self-serving and grounded in assumptions of superiority. Translation: the answers as to why America was so vulnerable to be colonized and why the Native Americans have never been able to become decolonized, because the white man thinks he's superior to them, like he thinks he's superior to so-called blacks, West Indians, and Haitians. He has the same mindset towards them. So what are the answers he gives? The Indians lost because they were primitive. You guys hear that all the time. The Indians were over here. They were primitive, swinging on ropes with bones in their nose and all types of primitive tropes that they put on the Native Americans, which are lies. They were primitive because their societies were weak, because they were few, because they were superstitious, and so forth. Such explanations explain nothing because a lot of those are lies. Even by their own false premises, the rolling back of colonialism in the present century has little to do with how primitive the natives were upon first contact. Places as diverse as Guinea and New Guinea are today governed by the descendants of their original inhabitants. Many parts of the ancient America were more advanced in Western terms than those. Yet Africans and Papuans have reclaimed a qualified autonomy, while the word American does not even mean a native of the continent. Now check this out. Check this out right here, guys. Why was America different? The short answer is disease. One of the things that kind of wiped off the Native Americans in large numbers was the white man came over here and he was a filthy animal. He's a filthy, we're about to read it on other pages. He was a filthy bastard when he came over here, riddled with diseases. And the Native Americans did not have immunity. One of the reasons why a lot of times we're able to go out amongst all types of people of all different nations, so forth and so on here in America, and you don't get sick all the time is because you have built up an immunity. Your immune system has been built up against a lot of the things that are around us in the environment. You ever notice that when you leave America and go to another country, like I've heard people go over to Africa, countries in Africa, or people have gone over to India or places like that, they go over there and they come down with malaria and all types of different illnesses when they get over there because their immune system is not used to drinking that water. It's not used to the air, so forth and so on. You have not built up an immunity to that. Everybody following? So the Native Americans, one of the reasons why the so-called white man was able to overcome them was not because they were primitive, but the white man was a filthy animal that came over here riddled with diseases. That's why. That's not the only reason why, but that's one of the reasons why. And all of that goes back to the curses. Most I speak about the curses that would come down on our people, literal illnesses in Deuteronomy 28. Literal illnesses that would come down on us. And that happened to the Native Americans. We're reading it. Why was America different? The short answer is disease. As H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, Europe possessed biological weapons that fate had been stacking against America for thousands of years. Among these were smallpox. The Native Americans didn't know nothing about smallpox till the white man got here. Measles, influenza, bubonic plague, yellow fever, cholera, and malaria. Watch this. All unknown in the Western Hemisphere before 1492. The Native Americans didn't have none of those illnesses. None of them. But as soon as the white man got here, the Indians started dropping like flies because the white man was a filthy bastard. Listen, I know people say you black Israelites are racist. No, I'm just reading a history book that was written by a white man. Ronald Wright is a white man. Somehow, they had not made the journey to the New World without the remote ancestors of the American Indians during the last Ice Age. Perhaps they were frozen to death on the way. Perhaps they had not yet evolved. Whatever the reason, Native Americans, let's go to the next page, page number 14, having had no exposure, had little or no immunity. They caught the new sicknesses quickly, and infection was extremely virulent. Look at this, guys. The Indians die so easily that the bare look and smell of a Spaniard causes them to give up the ghost. You guys see that? I'm going to read that again. The Indians die so easily that the bare look and smell of a Spaniard causes them to give up to the ghost. As soon as they get exposure to the white man, they look at him and they smell him, they die. This is the stuff that Donald Trump is saying he don't want to talk about. You don't want to talk about this history. They sure as hell ain't telling you your children this in schools. They're not going to have you read these books. Oh, there's more. Let's go to page number 21 in the same book. Let's see what it says over here. It says, there were also schools, ateliers, shops with hanging signs, and public lavatories. I'm going to read that again. There were schools, ateliers, and shops with hanging signs and public lavatories. The Native Americans had these. Don't believe that primitive stuff. They had these before the white man got here. Unlike European cities of the day, Mexico was clean. That was the Aztecs. Mexico was clean. Wastes were hauled away by barge and composited for fertilizer. You think the white man didn't come up with that? You guys see waste being hauled away by barges from your cities or turned into fertilizer? They got that from the natives. The Europeans in Europe were not doing that. They learned that from the natives that they're calling primitive. 1,000 men slept and 1,000 men swept and washed the streets every day. Every day, Mexico City, you had 1,000 men that would sweep the streets and wash the streets. Today, in the same land of America, where the so-called white man is that the natives had, you go into any major city and it's filthy. New York City is filthy. Certain parts of Los Angeles is filthy. Detroit, Cleveland, Chicago, filthy. A lot of times people ask me, like when I'm in big cities, they ask me, why do I walk in the street? Anybody that's with me always will notice, like when I'm in major cities, a lot of times I walk in the street and not on the sidewalk. Who wants to figure out why I always walk in the street and not on the sidewalk? Because there's dog crap everywhere. Certain parts of the Bronx, you can't even walk on a sidewalk because there's dog crap every 3, 4, 5 feet. A 1,000 men swept and washed the streets each day. Refined Aztecs who bathed daily. So the Aztecs took a bath every day. Found it advisable to hold flowers to their noses when they meet Europeans. I'm going to read that again. Refined Aztecs who bathed daily found it advisable to hold flowers to their noses when they met Europeans who made a point of being filthy. Can't call this racism. I'm just reading from a book that the white man put together. We didn't put this together. But this is the stuff that they don't want to talk about. But we're going to talk about it. And if they don't want to teach it to our children, then guess what? We as parents, grandparents, uncles, aunties, or just concerned for our people in general and all the children of our community, it is our responsibility to teach our children these things if the educational system doesn't want to teach them. Because we're the ones that's supposed to teach our people anyway. In truth, we're not really supposed to expect the white man to teach us this stuff. If this was your history, would you want this to be taught to? If you were the ones that didn't take a bath every day, if you were the ones, let me rephrase that. If we as a people were the ones that didn't bathe every day, if we as a people were the ones that somebody had to hold a flower to their nose when they come up on us, you wouldn't want the history taught either. So I kind of understand why they don't want this taught. Let's read some more. It says Spaniards considered bathing an infidel Moorish custom. The Moors were black. The Moors were black. Spaniards, the white man, considered bathing an infidel Moorish custom. That's a black thing to bathe every day. To be too clean was to risk the attention of the Inquisition. The white man said, if you're too clean, you are in jeopardy of the Inquisition. What was the Inquisition? Let's go to the next slide. It says the Inquisition was a Catholic judicial system that originated in the 12th century and lasted for hundreds of years. It was used to identify and punish heresy. So, in other words, if you were too clean, you could be brought before the Inquisition as a heretic. Apostasy, blasphemy, and witchcraft. To be too clean was to fall under these umbrellas and you'll be brought before a judicial system. So a lot of the Spaniards didn't bathe every day. They didn't. And so the Native Americans did not have any immunity. So when you don't bathe every day, brothers and sisters, what's going to happen? Of course, you're going to be riddled with diseases. Of course. And you come amongst the people that have no immunity to it, and that's why they wind up dying off, a lot of them. All these are curses the Most High allowed to come down on our people, though. Understand that. There's more. Let's jump over to page number 22, because this is the mistake that, let's come back a little bit. Let's go back a couple of slides a little bit, and let's read the scripture really quickly. Oh, you know what? We'll come back to it. This is the book of Sirach, the Apocrypha, chapter 12, verse 10. It's the scripture we're all familiar with. Let's read it. It says, never trust thine enemy. So in addition to the Indians not being immune to these filthy animals that came over here, the Indians that didn't die, the natives that didn't die, tried to make friends with the white man. That's what they tried to do. They made friends with him. That's a mistake. Sirach chapter 12, verse 10, it says, never trust thine enemy, for like as iron rusteth, so is his wickedness. Iron doesn't just rust automatically. Iron has to be introduced to the right environment or elements for the rust to appear on the iron. So the white man will come amongst you and he ain't going to show his rust. Not at first, but give him the right opportunity, the right environment, then them horns are going to show. And that's what wound up happening to the Aztecs. So we're on page number 22 of the same book. And let's read about Montezuma. It says Montezuma decided on a policy of appeasement. So he tried to appease the enemy. That was a mistake. It says he sent 5 men to greet Cortez. The person that so-called conquered the Mexicans is a devil by the name of Hernando Cortez. Everybody knows about Columbus, but Columbus did not conquer, quote unquote, all of the Caribbean and South America. There were other guys as well. So Hernando Cortez is the one that is credited with conquering the Aztec Indians. So Montezuma sent 5 men to greet Cortez and to take him gifts, because these white people just showed up in the land and basically were looking for a way to take over. So Montezuma said, now let's try to be friends. He said to them, it is said that our Lord has returned to this land. Go to meet him, make a speech to him, open your eyes to what he says, listen, and remember well. Here is what you must take to our Lord, that is the regalia of, I can't pronounce that. That's one of the gods that the Aztec worshipped. And so what Montezuma did was he took the regalia of this god and tried to give it to Hernando Cortez as a sign of saying, hey, you know what? You're this Lord returning to us now, as our oral tradition said is supposed to happen. That's what he did. Really just trying to appease so that there would not be a war between them and Cortez. That was the wrong thing to do. There was a serpent mask of turquoise, a head fan made of quetzal feathers, a collar with a gold disc in the middle, a shield adorned with gold, and the list continues for more than 2 pages. So they took these gifts to Montezuma. Say to him, we are sent by your deputy Montezuma. These are the gifts with which he welcomes you to Mexico. So what did they do? They did the opposite of what Sirach said. They trusted their enemy. That's what they did. Let's go to page number 24. I'm not going to do all that reading on that page. I'm just going to kind of give you guys a outline of what's going on here. So the Aztecs were the top tribe in what today is known as Mexico, right? But you had a lot of sub-tribes that were not Aztecs. And the Aztecs kind of ruled over these sub-tribes too. These other sub-tribes would pay tribute to the Aztecs, if that makes sense. Their leaders would be like vassals to the Aztecs. They were allowed to be autonomous, but they still were under the umbrella of the Aztecs. These other tribes didn't like that. They didn't like that. So when the white man comes over, Hernando Cortez, what do you think these sub-tribes, what do you think they did? They sided with the white man against the Aztecs. Because Cortez said, you know what? I'm going to defeat your enemy. And then we're going to basically rule together. Partake of all the spoils, all the gold, whatever they have. We're going to partake of that together. And these other sub-tribes are like, you know what? Yeah, that sounds good. And so they got with Cortez and they wound up overthrowing the Aztecs. That's what happened. But I want to show you guys what type of filthy animal the so-called white man is after the battle took place. Let's look at the bottom of page number 24, the invasion, right? So after the war, one of these Spaniards was wounded. And this is what he did. That night, wrote Bernal Diaz, we dressed our wounds with, so what did they dress their wounds with? Let's find out. Let's go to the next page, page number 25. After the war, they were wounded, and that night, they dressed their wounds with the fat from a stout Indian whom we had killed and cut open, for we had no oil. So they found a stout native that they had killed during the battle, cut him open, and used the oils from his body to rub on their wounds. That's the type of people that the natives were dealing with. That's the white man for you. This is the history that your president-elect says they don't want to talk about no more. Let's go to page number 54 of the same book. Now we're going to go to a different kingdom further south in South America. We're going to go to the kingdom of the Mayans. And we're going to start right here at the bottom of page number 54. It says the following passage recalls the final days of Caciquel's glory, then somberly describes the effect of smallpox on the nation's royalty. So not only were the Aztecs ravaged by these filthy savages that came over here riddled with diseases, but so were the Mayans. The disease spread outward from Mexico, softening up the native kingdom before the Spanish attack. So in other words, these natives that were Mayans, so many of them fell sick from some of the same diseases the Mexicans did. It was easy for Esau to come in and destroy them. That goes back to the beginning of the book when we read, was it that the Native Americans were primitive? Were they weak? No, the white man brought diseases over here. And some of the natives were catching it. And we also know certain histories that some of the Native Americans weren't catching it fast enough. So Esau started putting it in pillows and blankets. That's what he was doing, to kill them all faster. But they don't want their children or your children to be taught this history. I'm going to skip this for now. I'm probably going to skip this page for now as well, but just look at some of the numbers. There were 10,000. If you guys are watching the PowerPoint, if you're on Clubhouse, you're not, you guys can feel free to come over to YouTube. If You guys are looking. There was 10,000 Indians that were slaughtered by the Spaniards. 10,000 on this particular battle. Page 57. Let's just read this little part right here. So many natives were killed, the Mayan Indians. It says the Indians they killed were so many that they made a river of blood, which became the Ollantaytambo River, which is a river of blood. That's how many people or natives that they killed. Now, do you guys understand why they don't want to talk about it? Some more stuff that they don't teach you in history class. And I'm just going to kind of breeze through it really quickly. We're not going to read everything. This is from a book called The Other Slavery. Because sadly, you have a lot of black people that are ignorant of history and don't know that the Native Americans were in slavery too. People be like, well, how are the Native Americans Israelites? They don't fit the curses. They didn't go into slavery. No, you don't know history. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. We're just going to read a couple of paragraphs from the introduction. I don't even have to go into the body of the book. The introduction is going to tell us everything that we need to know. Listen, it says the very word slavery brings to mind African bodies stuffed in the hold of a ship, or white apron maids bustling in the antebellum home. Textbooks, memoirs, movies continuously reinforce the notion that slaves were black Africans imported into the New World. We may be aware that in the long sweep of history, people other than Africans have been held in bondage. Let's jump down to the second paragraph just to get to the point, some of the points. Consider the debate at the conclusion of the U.S.-Mexican War of 1846 to 1848. The United States had just acquired Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, Nevada, Utah, more than half of Colorado, and parts of Wyoming and Kansas. The question facing the country was whether slavery should be allowed in the vast territorial haul. By slavery, of course, politicians of that era meant African slavery. But the adjective was wholly unnecessary, as everyone in the United States knew who the slaves were. Therefore, it came as a revelation to many Easterners making their way across the continent that there were also Indian slaves, entrapped in a distinct brand of bondage that was even older in the New World, because the Spaniards were putting the Indians as slaves. All the way back in the 14, 15, and 1600s, they were doing that. Perpetrated by colonial Spain and inherited by Mexico with the Treaty of Guadalupe, Hidalgo at the end of the war. This other slavery became a part of America's existence. Look at this. California may have entered the Union as a free soil state, but American settlers soon discovered that the buying and selling of Indians was a common practice there. Does everybody see that? Let's keep reading. As early as 1846, the first American commander of San Francisco acknowledged that certain persons have been and still are imprisoning and holding to service Indians against their will. So this took place with the Spaniards, right? And then all the way later, let's go back and let's get the date. All the way back, 1848, when the United States annexed California and California became a state, 1848, you go from 1492, right, all the way to 1848, that's almost 400 years. So almost 400 years later, the natives are still slaves. Not to the numbers of the Black Americans, what they call Black Americans today, not to those numbers, but they will be enslaved too. So all this garbage about them not having gone into slavery, not fitting the curses, that's just somebody that does not know history at all. Okay. Now we're going to come out and we're going to switch gears just a little bit. And we're going to talk about the Puritans under King James. Let's go. All right. So I'm at a Wikipedia article called The History of the Puritans under James I. I'm just going to read selected portions of this entry. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Now, for those that know me really well, know I don't really like Wikipedia like that. I do use it, but I don't like it like that. But I vetted this article because as I read, rather than me take 100 screenshots of books and I would have been here all day, I read this article and I vetted it. And for the most part, the article is on point based on history books that I've read. So that's the reason why I'm going to use it. And we're going to learn some things. We're going to learn some things, some new things for those of you guys that are not familiar with this history. And we're going to circle right back, bringing ourselves up to so-called Thanksgiving. The history of the Puritans under King James. So we know the history that basically Ferdinand and Isabella, right, was the ones that gave Columbus and the other explorers the green light, along with the Pope Alexander VI, and others after. They gave them the green light to come over here to the Americas and conquer the land in the name of the Catholic Church, in the name of the monarchy, to take all the riches of this land and bring it back, and, of course, to convert the natives by means of slavery, of course, to Christianity, mainly Roman Catholicism. We all know that history. That was the Spaniards. But the colonies on the eastern seaboard of America, the 13 colonies, those come from Britain. So what about that history? Why did the Puritans come over here? Let's read. It says, the reign of King James I of England saw the continued rise of the Puritan movement in England. So there was a rise of a Puritan movement in England. We're going to explain as we read on. It's going to explain to you what this rise in the Puritan movement was. That began during the reign of Queen Elizabeth, and the continued clash with the authorities of the Church of England. So you guys can understand, I'm trying to make this as simple as I can. There was a beef between the Puritans and the Church of England. They had beef. Doctrinal beef, like how you see all the doctrinal beefs today. Well, it was doctrinal beef back then too. They had beef. This eventually led to the further alienation of Anglicans and Puritans from one another in the 17th century during the reign of King Charles I. So the Anglicans would be your Church of England, right? And the Puritans would be the Puritans. So we have this conversation all the time on Clubhouse, and sometimes I talk about it during my classes and definitely during the academy. I always tell brothers and sisters that you have to keep in mind that even though the Bible is a Hebrew Israelite document, the translators of the Bible were Christians. They were Anglicans. That's who it was, mainly. And Puritans also. They were Anglicans and Puritans. We're going to see that later on in this article. That's why certain verses read the way that they read, because it was the translator's choice in certain parts of the Bible to include certain words because that was their bias being Christians. That's the reason why we encourage brothers and sisters to go back and look at the lexicon, look at the Hebrew and look at the Greek, because some of the words that were translated into English were translated that way because the translators were Christians and their biases seeped into certain parts of the text. Like you see the word Easter in the book of Acts. That doesn't belong there. Everybody understand? All right. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. Let's keep going. The further alienation of the Anglicans and Puritans from one another in the 17th century during the reign of Charles I, that eventually brought about the English Civil War. So there was a civil war between the Puritans and the Anglicans. That's what happened, right? Now let's come down to the next paragraph. So both of these factions are up under the king. So he's presiding over the whole thing. The Puritans did not like him. The Catholics did not like him. And he did not help himself with some of the decisions he made that we're about to read. It says, King James was brought up in Scotland under the influence of strict Scottish Calvinist tutors like George Buchanan, who sought to instill in him a commitment to the Protestant cause in Scotland. When he became the king of both England and Scotland, James sought to keep the Church of England strictly under monarchical rule and the power of the episcopacy. Episcopacy, previously established under Elizabeth. In other words, he wanted to be a divine ruler of the church as the king, which is off. That's not even biblical. Even the kings of Israel did not have divine rule over the scriptures. The priests did, not the kings. But he set himself up as being the top guy. And what he says go, even when it comes to the Bible. That was wrong. King James held strong convictions on the divine right of kings and even wrote a book on the subject. Okay. Now, I want to come down here and let's read the portion that says the millenary petition. I'm trying to bring you guys up to speed as to why the Puritans even came over here as pilgrims. This is the why. Elizabeth I died in 1603, and she was succeeded by James VI of Scotland, who had been King of Scots since the abdication of his mother, Mary, Queen of Scots, in 1567, when James was 1 year old. So for those of you from the unconscious community that says that King James was sleeping with his mother, you also don't know history. Mary, Queen of Scots, abdicated the throne when her son was 1 year old. The only way that they could have been having sex was if she was having sex with her 1 year old. And last time I checked, that's called statutory rape. So that's not a real thing. Why did she have to abdicate the throne? Because she murdered his father, or had his father murdered. That was one of the reasons why. Not the only one, but that's one of the reasons why. But let's keep going. James had little contact with his mother and was raised by guardians in the Presbyterian Church of Scotland. John Knox had led the Scottish Reformation beginning in 1560, and the Church of Scotland looked broadly like the type of church that the Puritans wanted in England. In 1599, in his 1599 book, Basilicon Doron, the king had harsh words for the Puritans. So he had some harsh words for these Puritans who would eventually become your pilgrims that would come over here. But his criticism seemed directed at the most extreme of the Puritans, and it seemed likely that the king would agree to moderate reform. So again, going back, I'm trying to keep this as simple as I can. The Puritans wanted reforms in the Church of England, which King James presided over. They wanted to see reforms. And he said, no, I'm the divine ruler. And the answer is no. So they had something called the Puritans put together something called the Millenary Petition. And they had a conference at Hampton Court in 1604. So now we're going to read the outcome of this conference. One of the things that they were against, the Puritans, was the sign of the cross at baptism. You ever seen when people make the sign of the cross? The Puritans was like, that's pagan. We shouldn't do that. The Church of England under the king said, yes, we're going to keep that. I'm just going to give you guys some of the cliff notes. We're going to read all of it. The exchanging of rings during the marriage ceremony, which the Puritans said was unscriptural, which they were right, and superstitious, which they were right. But the king said, no, we're keeping that too. The ceremonious bowing at the name of Jesus during worship, again, they saw that as superstitious. So these are some of the beefs that these guys had. And so they had this council at Hampton Court in 1604. I'm going to skip. The Pilgrims and the planting of Plymouth Colony in 1620. So because they couldn't come to an agreement, you had a lot of the Puritans that left England in 1620 and came to America, and these are your pilgrims that would eventually oppress and destroy the Native Americans. This is them. Does everybody see that? I know I skipped something here that I wanted to show you guys. Oh, the 1611. Right. One of the things to come out of the Hampton Court Conference in 1604, one of the things to come out of that conference was they agreed to a new translation of the Bible, which would eventually become your KJV. Because the Puritans did not write at the time, the Bishop's Bible was the Great Bible was the Bible that everybody was using. But the Puritans preferred the Geneva Bible instead. So they were beefing about what translation to use. Where does that sound familiar? That sounds familiar to today. It's the same things that were going on back then are the same things that are going on today. So to make a long story short, because of all these beefs or whatever like that, the Puritans decided to leave, to come over to the Americas and start over. Everybody with me? Okay. Now we're going to come back to the PowerPoint. I'm going to show you guys something. Now, the Most High, the Bible says, man's goings is of the Lord, how then can a man understand their ways? And the Bible also says the king's heart is in the hand of the Most High. So the Most High moves everything that goes on this earth, whatever is done. So that whole thing that we just read about King James being this divine ruler over the Church of England and basically having his way and denying the Puritans, for the most part, a lot of their requests, set the whole thing in motion for those people, some of the most extreme of them, to be sent to America or to come to America, and they would overcome the Native Americans, all which is prophecy and all of which goes back to the curses that the Most High put on our people for breaking God's laws. Why? Because the Native Americans were over here being pagans. A lot of them were over here being pagans. So the Most High set the whole thing in motion. One of the things that's really interesting about history, though, is that the Puritans, for the most part, a lot of their objections to what King James was saying were correct. Because in essence, the Church of England is nothing but the Roman Catholic Church. That's all it is. The Church of England shouldn't even have existed. I've gone over this in my academies, and I'm going to show you guys this now. The only reason why the Church of England even existed was because Henry VIII couldn't get his way. He couldn't get his way. So because he couldn't get his way, he made his own church. And that set everything in motion. Check this video out real quick.
If we were to travel back to the year 1500, we'd see every kingdom across Western Europe declaring their allegiance to the Catholic Church. And if you were to say that some nations were to break away from that church, honestly, it wouldn't be the most shocking thing in the world. There was mass corruption, heaps of power placed into the hands of one person, the Pope, and many priests had little to no education or training. And so when someone like Luther came on the scene, much of the clergy were no match for him in debating what the Bible actually said. But if you were to put all your money on one kingdom who would not break away under any circumstances, you'd bet your life savings on England. The priests were actually pretty well educated in comparison to the rest of Europe, and there was much less corruption in England than elsewhere. And most of all, the King of England and the Pope always tended to be pretty tight with each other, yet somehow England went from being the least likely kingdom to break away to the one that actually created its own church. And to figure out how, we need to get to know this guy here. Now, today's video is not going to cover the most common topics of Henry VIII.
So that's the drawing that they gave of Henry VIII, right? But I want you guys, if you're looking at the PowerPoint, to look at what I have on the right-hand side of the screen. That's actually an image from the National Portrait Gallery in England. And that's Henry VIII as a young boy. And you guys will notice he has an afro. I'm just saying, you do with that information what you will. I'm just saying. But back to our regularly scheduled program. Let's go.
Such as his 6 wives. However, it will look at something in my mind far more interesting. How could one man make the most Catholic of all the countries actually become the country that is most openly opposed to the Catholic faith? Hello there. So young Henry was born in 1491 when his father, Henry VII, was sitting on the throne. Now, this is really important. Henry VII didn't become the king with ease. His claim to the throne was really weak. Basically, he had an uncle who was the lover of the queen after her husband died, and he claimed his lineage from the queen's lover, Jasper Tudor, not exactly someone who came from a long line of previous kings. And so Henry VII became the king by successfully challenging Richard III, then defeating him on the battlefield in 1485. And if Henry VII didn't have a long list of fathers and grandfathers who were kings, he needed to find another way of being seen as the right king. And so Henry VII and the Pope became very tight, and the Pope gave God's blessing, so to speak, upon Henry VII. Now, Henry VIII was not supposed to replace his father as the king because he was actually the second-born son to his brother Arthur. And so in 1501, at the age of 15, Arthur married Princess Catherine of Aragon, who was the daughter of the King and Queen of Spain. But tragedy struck young Arthur, and he actually died only 20 weeks later from an unknown illness.
So Henry VII's first son, Arthur, was supposed to be the monarch. Married Catherine of Aragon, and then dies. So now what?
And so this left 10-year-old Henry as the heir to the throne, but his father kept him out of public life and he gave him few responsibilities. Now, Henry VII was keen to keep an alliance with Spain, so he suggested to young Henry that he should marry Princess Catherine, but Henry refused. I mean, he was only 12.
So his father now wants him to marry his deceased brother's wife, except for the fact that she's a grown woman and he was only 12. You guys see, like, there's always this talk about how the older men preyed on the younger women. Well, brothers and sisters, sometimes it was reversed too. It was reversed also. Let's go.
So come 1509, Henry VII died at age 52, and so 17-year-old Henry VIII became the King of England. Now, a few weeks before he was coronated, Henry decided that he would actually marry the 23-year-old widow, Catherine, and they quietly married. So Henry married his brother's widow. And in 1510, Catherine gave birth to a stillborn, Then in 1511, she gave birth to a boy who tragically died a few weeks after birth. And then she continued to have miscarriages until 1516, when she gave birth to a baby girl.
So she got pregnant quite a few times, right? Because obviously he wants to have a male heir to pass down the kingdom to after he dies. So she had a couple of miscarriages of boys. And then finally, when she was able to carry a child to term, it was a girl. Henry VIII didn't like that. Let's go.
Mary Tudor. Now, as all of this was happening, Henry took some mistresses. Now, how many is a matter of debate, but one of his mistresses gave birth to his son, Henry Fitzroy. Now, as Henry and Catherine were trying for children, the Protestant Reformation had also begun in Germany. Martin Luther had led the charge in criticizing the Catholic Church, and like his father, Henry decided to step in on the side of the Catholic Church. He wrote a pamphlet called Defense of the Seven Sacraments, and this impressed Pope Leo X, who gave Henry the title of Defender of the Faith. But as Henry was being seen as a hero of the Catholic faith, there still remained a child issue for him. Henry needed to have a male heir. It was the safest way to secure his line of succession, and given that his family was new to the throne, leaving no male heir was a surefire way to see his family thrown out. So what do you do? One option was to try and get the Pope to declare that his illegitimate son, Henry Fitzroy, should actually be the next king. But just as the church was getting accused of corruption, Henry knew that this would be a terrible look for the Pope, and that he probably wouldn't agree to it. Another was to marry Mary off as soon as possible and have her give birth to a grandson to take over before Henry died, but this was a highly risky move because Henry knew that he'd likely die before that point. The final option for Henry was to try and divorce Catherine and marry someone else who instead would give him the son he longed for. There were three options there, but Henry increasingly liked the idea of the last one because a woman by the name of Anne Boleyn had actually caught his eye. He tried to make her his mistress, but she said she'd only be his wife. And with Henry head over heels for Anne, he decided to try and get a divorce from Catherine. And so in 1527, Henry went to the new Pope, Pope Clement VII, and he asked for a divorce. Henry actually appealed to the Bible and he picked out a verse from the book of Leviticus that said, if a man marries his brother's wife, it is an act of impurity, he has dishonored his brother and they will be childless. And Henry argued that because Catherine had earlier married his brother Arthur, his own marriage to Catherine was therefore never legitimate in the eyes of God, and God had cursed them by them being childless. I mean, imagine how his daughter Mary must have felt hearing this. And so at the trial of Blackfriars in 1529, basically Henry continued to argue that he should get the divorce and that Anne Boleyn should become his new queen. Now, there was a big problem. Because Europe was webbed together by alliances through marriage, a lot of the monarchs were actually related to each other. And Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, who we've seen in previous videos, was actually the nephew of Catherine, and for him and the Habsburg family name, it was utterly humiliating watching Henry discard his auntie like that. And so the Pope then had a decision of to side with Charles or to side with Henry. Charles had actually sacked and imprisoned the Pope earlier in 1527, and fearful of Charles, he sided with him and refused to give Henry a divorce. This infuriated Henry, and in his eyes, with Charles and Pope Clement so clearly conspiring against him, he decided to break away from the church. The Act of Royal Supremacy in 1534 formalised the separation and replaced the Pope with the King. Henry was the new head of the Church of England.
That's where King James got it from. That's where King James got it from. That's why he was doing what he was doing.
And in terms of what the church believed, the church was very much still Catholic in practice.
There it is. They were still Catholics. There was no difference between the Church of England and the Catholic Church, except they didn't have a pope. The king was the supreme divine ruler of the church. That was the only difference. So Henry VIII established this, all because he couldn't get his way. Then it was passed down to to Elizabeth after him, right? And then after that, you get King James. He has that same mindset. And that's when you have that division within the kingdom between the Puritans and the Anglicans. And so the Puritans decided they were going to leave England because of that and come here to the Americas. But the Most High was guiding all of this because our people were over here in this hemisphere being pagans and being wicked. So guess what? The Most High was going to bring Esau down on them.
Hey, Salakia priest, I got a question. Real quick, on the same topic, what bloodline was Henry VIII? Because I know James is Stuart. What line did this dude come from?
So the Henry VIII was a Tudor. You had the Tudors. which Mary Queen of Scots, Mary Queen of Scots and Elizabeth were the last of the Tudors, right? So that's the maternal. That's the maternal line of King James. That's the Henry VIII is on the maternal line. The paternal line is the Stuarts. That's why it changes after Elizabeth dies. That's why it changes from the Tudors to the Stuarts, because it's going now on the paternal line now that he's king. You got it? Before him, a female was queen. That was Elizabeth. She was queen before him. But now that a man is sitting on the throne, it goes by the paternal line. So that's why it's known as the Stuarts.
So I guess I asked that to ask this now. So were they Negro? Because the image of Henry VIII, he got a little woolly hair, like he got a little fro right there. So Henry VIII was Negro. The Tudors were Negro. That's the question.
Yes, they were Negroes, and there's more. You know, I got more stuff in other PowerPoints to show that these are all black people, all of them. Elizabeth, these are all black people, but these people that we're reading this history about, Henry VIII, Elizabeth I, Mary Tudor, these are all on King James's mother's side. That's the mother side of the family. The father's side of the family is from Scotland. The father's side of the family is from Scotland, but he was raised under the mother's side of the family and their influence, because remember, his father was killed off when he was a baby. So he was raised under the influence of his mother's side of the family. That's why when he became king, he kept a lot of the same things that they were doing before him, like Henry VIII. He kept the Church of England. He looked at himself as the divine ruler of the kingdom, just like Henry VIII, his mother's side of the family. That's what he did. And then as a result, that put everything in motion for the Puritans to break off from the Church of England and come over here. But the Most High were going to use them as a sword against the natives because they was over here being pagans. And of course, they overdid it.
Right.
They overdid it.
And that's what I wanted to ask also. But I'm going to wait till you get to it, because I'm looking at the history while you're talking. I'm Googling and listening to you. And I'm like, hold on. Them so-called Puritans, they came in 1600s. When they quote unquote landed on Plymouth Rock, like what Malcolm X said. I'm like, hold on, but quote unquote King James was the king in the 1600s. He ain't died in 1658. So these crackers came when King James was alive, and they started killing, like you said, the Most High probably used them as a sword to get at 10 tribe over here, but King James was still reigning at the time. I just wanted to bring that up.
Right, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And understand, just like when I really want to go too far into the, to the left, understand this history mirrors Rome. Because remember, we overthrew the Roman Empire, but we still was keeping all the same pagan practices that the Roman Empire that we overthrew. We only overthrew them because they was oppressing us, right? That's why we overthrew them. But we didn't change our ways when we overthrew Rome. We kept all the same customs that they kept. And it's the same thing wherever we were, whether it was Spain, whether it was England, wherever we ruled, we kept the same stupid stuff that the people before us was doing. Just it was a black face sitting on the throne. That was it. Just like politicians today, right? You have a city that has the predominantly black, whatever, predominantly Latino, whatever you want to say, that for years upon years upon years have like white mayor in a predominantly black city, right? And we're like, we have to, elect a black mayor. And we get a black mayor. What does the black mayor does? He does the same thing that the white mayor does. You get a black police chief. What does he do? The same thing that the white police chief does. So yeah, it's the same thing. Same thing. All right. All right. So let's go.
If we would.
So now, let's go back to Sirach chapter 12 and let's pick it up from verse 10 and read all the way down. And I'm going to show you guys this next video. It says, "Never trust thine enemy, for like as iron rusteth, so is his wickedness." The right environment, the right time, they're going to show their true colors. Verse 11, "Though he humble himself," because we read in the book earlier when Cortez came over here, at first Cortez humbled himself. Montezuma tried to be nice to him. And when the white man had the right opportunity with the right allies, overthrew them anyway. "Though he humble himself and go crouching, yet take good heed and beware of him. And thou shalt be unto him as if thou hadst wiped a looking glass. And thou shalt know that his rust hath not been altogether wiped away. Set him not by thee." That's what Montezuma messed up. And some of the other Native American tribes messed up. They allowed white people to be set side by side with them, as we're going to see in this video. That's the wrong thing to do. "When he hath overthrown thee, he stand up in thy place." Now the white man is an Indian. He's a $5 Indian, right? The scriptures don't lie. Neither let him sit at thy right hand, lest he seek to take thy seat. And thou at the last remember my words and be pricked therewith. Now we can look at history, because we have the vantage point of looking back at history, and we could be pricked with history and see all of this is literally what took place in history. Let's watch this video real quick.
We all know the famous story of Thanksgiving, the picture-perfect meal shared by Native Americans and Pilgrims as a symbol of gratitude, cooperation, and peace. The true story behind the feast is much more complex. Among other things, the first Thanksgiving was a temporary celebration in the midst of struggle and cultural misunderstandings. Keep watching to learn more about the Pilgrims, the Native Americans, and the captivating true story of the first Thanksgiving.
Remember, the Pilgrims are the Puritans of England that didn't like what was going on with the Church of England, and so they came over here.
Who attended the first Thanksgiving? To fully understand the significance of the first Thanksgiving, we must also understand the people who attended it. The Pilgrims, who were struggling to survive in a new world, and the Wampanoag people, who had lived on the land for centuries.
This is the part Donald Trump wants us to forget. He wants us to forget that the Pilgrims, when they came over here, they were struggling. They couldn't even grow food. They couldn't do anything. They didn't know how to cultivate the land. The natives had to teach them that. Well, they want to take that out of school books.
Were grappling with a changing world as more and more European settlers arrived. We'll begin with the Pilgrims. The early 1600s were a time of exploration, hardship, and survival for the Pilgrims, a group of settlers who had left England to start anew after growing tired of religious persecution in their homeland. After a grueling journey across the Atlantic on the Mayflower, they landed near what we know today as Plymouth, Massachusetts. The journey was brutal. The Mayflower set sail in September 1620 with over 100 passengers crammed into a single deck below the main deck.
Disease-riddled passengers. He should have said that. The devils had diseases too, just like the Spaniards did.
During the 2-month journey, they faced cramped quarters, poor sanitation, and constant seasickness.
That's the reason why when they got over here, they were filled with diseases. There was poor sanitation. There's poop everywhere, urine everywhere. They stink. They wasn't bathing. None of that.
To make matters worse, they arrived in America as winter was beginning. Many were already weak from the journey, and the cold made survival even more of a challenge. The Pilgrims' first winter in New England was much harsher than expected. Without enough food and shelter to prepare for the winter, they endured freezing temperatures, illnesses, and malnutrition. By spring, nearly half of the settlers had perished from exposure, unprotection from severe weather, or disease. Every day was a struggle for the newly arrived Pilgrims as their survival hung in the balance. The Pilgrims were not alone. They settled in the territory of the Wampanoag tribe. Despite the Pilgrims' need for help, early interactions between the Pilgrims and the indigenous people were marred by mistrust.
As it should be, because that's what the scripture said. Don't trust them. So at the beginning, they had the right idea.
The two groups had vastly different cultures, languages, and beliefs. Both sides knew that a misstep might lead to conflict, which neither people could afford. The Wampanoag people had lived in the area for centuries, cultivating the land, fishing, hunting, and gathering. Their leader, Massacre, was well aware of the encroachment of European settlers and the danger it posed to his people. Along with the threat they posed, Massacre also recognized the opportunity the newcomers represented. The Wampanoag people had suffered from devastating diseases brought by earlier European explorers.
Did you guys catch that? So going all the way south to where the Mayans are in South America, coming up north to Mexico City, all the way north to Massachusetts. All the way north. It's a long journey, all up and down, North Central to South America. The natives were being wiped out by diseases these Edomites were bringing over here.
And their population was severely reduced. He believed an alliance with the Pilgrims could help strengthen their defenses against rival tribes.
And that's wrong. The scriptures say you're not supposed to do that. But he did it. He did it because he understood that he had rival tribes that was out to take them down, just like Montezuma had to the south in Mexico City. It's all the same. So you try to make friends with the white man.
This is where a man named Squanto came in. Squanto was a Patuxet tribesman with a unique perspective on the new European arrivals. Years before, Squanto was captured by English traders and sold into slavery in Spain. He managed to
Did
escape.
you guys catch that? I know I'm stopping a lot, but I want you guys to catch that. Listen again.
That's where a man named Squanto came in. Squanto was a Patuxet tribesman with a unique perspective on the new European arrivals. Years before, Squanto was captured by English traders and sold into slavery in Spain.
So don't let nobody tell you the natives didn't go into slavery. Natives served as slaves here in North America, in states like Utah, California, Texas, etc. They served as slaves here, and some of them were taken to slavery and sent back to Spain. They do fit the curses. This is the stuff that Donald Trump doesn't want to be spoken about anymore. They want to kill critical race theory.
He managed to escape to England, where he learned English, before eventually returning to his homeland. Tragically, he found his entire Patuxet tribe wiped out by disease when he returned. Squanto became an interpreter and a mediator, bridging the gap between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag. His knowledge of English and first-hand experience with both cultures made him an invaluable ally to both sides. He taught the Pilgrims essential survival skills, such as planting corn, using fish as fertilizer, catching fish and eel, and safely foraging for edible and medicinal plants. This shared knowledge transformed the Pilgrims' chances for survival, allowing them to finally cultivate their own food. As the relationship between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag people strengthened, Massasoit and the Pilgrim leaders agreed on a mutual protection treaty. This pact was intended to safeguard both parties from potential threats and establish peace and cooperation. The alliance was delicate, built on a mixture of trust, caution, and mutual need. The first Thanksgiving feast. By the autumn of 1621, the Pilgrims had managed their first successful harvest with the help of Squanto and the Wampanoag people. This was a monumental achievement for them, drastically increasing their hope for survival after nearly a year of unimaginable hardship and loss. The Pilgrims wanted to celebrate this harvest and express their gratitude for the help they'd received from their Native American allies. So they invited Massasoit, the Wampanoag leader, and his men to join them in a shared meal. This gathering would be what we now know as the first Thanksgiving, and it was meant to strengthen the blooming hope and friendship between the two groups of people. The exact date of the feast is unknown, but most historians place it in late September or early October. Unlike how we typically imagine it, this was not a single meal, but a festival, likely lasting about 3 days. It was a time for feasting, entertainment, and diplomacy. But it wasn't just a celebration. It was an opportunity for both groups to honor their alliance.
And one thing I do want to tell you guys, and I'm not going to take too long with this lesson today to go over, but if you guys are paying attention, he said that the first Thanksgiving was kept sometime around September or October, which is in line with pagan feast days from Europe. Another day, another time, I'll show you guys that. Eventually, America moved it back to the end of November, but originally, the original feast was around the same time that they hold a lot of pagan festivals in Europe.
I wouldn't even doubt if Halloween was tied into it.
It's tied into it. Halloween is tied into it. You know what I'm saying? And what happened was these people that are coming from England, even though they call themselves Christians, they were also doing what we call syncretism, where they were synchronizing pagan rituals in with Christianity. That's always been a thing. But I don't want to deviate too much right now.
Hey,
You want to say something? Yeah.
hey, yeah, real quick. Also, the Wampanoag wasn't only in New England. Also, brothers and sisters, you do have Native Americans still alive right now on what we call Long Island right now, right? You got a famous rapper who's a Native American, but everybody think he's just a regular Jake. His name is Flavor Flav. And he came out and he said that his people, of all his grandparents and great grandparents, have always been on Long Island, right? And you have certain descendants of the people, who, I guess you want to call them Wampanoag, as well as another tribe, and they all lived on Long Island, going all the way up to Massachusetts. So I don't want you to think this was only Massachusetts, right? Them crackers came and they did a serious job on our people, man. I just want to let you know that. And their side note, and I guess, Priest, you could go into it another time. There's also plantations on Long Island. I've been there. In my job, I travel all the way out to Montauk, Long Island. You do have plantations out there, and so-called pilgrims, they came out there as well too. So it wasn't just New England. That may be what you call a foothold, but then they spread and they started killing off the Native Americans. But what happened in New England also happened in Long Island, in New York also.
And there are other, you guys can do your own research. There are other videos that show that, because there was a video I was watching, but I didn't use it for this one because I didn't like certain parts. But there was a video I was watching where they actually show you the map of the Wampanoag territory, and it does extend down into New York and stuff. So Zahab is correct. But I just didn't use that video for this one, unless it's in here. I don't think so though. But let's see. I think it was another video I was watching, but let's continue.
Share their respective traditions and show mutual respect to each other. They came from wildly different backgrounds, but the first Thanksgiving offered them a chance to connect. Who was there and what did they eat? By the time the first Thanksgiving took place, about 50 pilgrims were left, a small fraction of the number who had arrived on the Mayflower. On the other hand, Massasoit arrived with around 90 Wampanoag men, a much larger group than the pilgrims had anticipated. Seeing their native neighbors in such large numbers might have intimidated the pilgrims, but they welcomed them anyway. Based on those numbers, the gathering would have been approximately 140 people, making it the largest social event the pilgrims had experienced since their arrival. The food at this feast would have been very different from what Americans now associate with Thanksgiving. While today's Thanksgiving meals typically include turkey, cranberry sauce, and pumpkin pie, the fare in 1621 consisted only of what the pilgrims and Wampanoag could hunt, gather, and grow with their own hands. The feast most likely consisted of a wide variety of native food. The Wampanoag brought 5 deer. For the Wampanoag, bringing food to a communal feast was customary, and venison was an essential part of their diet. Since they lived so close to the coast, the pilgrims had easy access to shellfish and other seafood. Mussels, lobster, clams, and even eel may have been part of the feast. Both groups may have provided fowl, like ducks, geese, or wild turkeys. Wild turkeys were native to the region and plentiful, but no historical record confirms that this classic Thanksgiving dish was on the menu. Both peoples might have also harvested vegetables like corn, squash, and beans.
Now, let's go back real quick. I want to show you guys something. Look at this.
Both peoples might have also harvested vegetables like corn, squash, and beans. Now, we all know that a much larger the food at this feast would have been very different from what Americans now associate with Thanksgiving. Variety of native food. The Wampanoag brought 5 deer. For the Wampanoag, bringing food to a communal feast was customary, and venison was an essential part of their diet. Since they lived so close to the coast, the pilgrims had easy access to shellfish and other seafood. Mussels, lobster, clams, and even eel may have been part of the feast. Both groups may have provided fowl, like ducks, geese, or wild turkeys. Wild turkeys were native to the region and plentiful, but no historical record confirms that this classic Thanksgiving dish was on the menu. Both peoples might have also harvested vegetables like corn, squash, and beans.
I want you guys to look at this one right here, corn. Right, corn was big over here. It's one of the staple crops of the Native Americans. The problem is with that is, where am I at here? Corn was also worshipped. It was also, they had gods to that stuff. I'm talking about Gad, the natives, they had that. That's part of the reason why the Most High had to bring them down. According to the legend, let's pick the first thing that's here. These are called corn deities. They had male deities that were corn deities and female deities that were corn deities. Here's one in the museum at the Denver Museum. And I'm kind of just winging it. Maize is, how do you say Spanish? How do you say corn in Spanish? You say maize today. That's how you say it. They had gods and goddesses to that stuff over here. It's pagan. Part of the reason why the Most High set the whole thing in motion for these people to come over here to bring the natives down, to go into punishment, just like Judah, Benjamin, Levi was going to go into punishment. Same thing, same curses, same people. The same way that when we were in West Africa, we had all these different pagan deities that we were dealing with over there. Same thing was happening over here. That's why corn is one of the staple foods of the natives, and it was one of the staple foods of the first so-called Thanksgiving as well. All this stuff lines up, right? Yeah, from curse line. Now, let me do it this way.
We all give to the region and plentiful, but no historical record confirms that this classic Thanksgiving dish was on the menu. Both peoples might have also harvested vegetables like corn, squash, and beans, as well as nuts and berries that were native to the forests of New England. Chestnuts, walnuts, and beech nuts were likely on the table for that first feast. Although cranberries would have been available, cranberry sauce probably wasn't part of the feast because the Pilgrims didn't have the luxury of sugar. What did the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag people do at the feast? While we often envision a large meal when we think of the first Thanksgiving, the feast was not just about eating. Historical accounts suggest that the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag put on various forms of entertainment throughout the event. The Pilgrims used the occasion to show off their military skills through firing drills and musket handling. This was likely a show of strength, demonstrating to the Wampanoag that they could defend themselves if needed. For the Wampanoag, gatherings like this typically involve storytelling, games, and athletic contests. It's possible that the Wampanoag entertained the Pilgrims with foot races, wrestling matches, or other forms of physical competition. These activities fostered camaraderie and mutual respect, allowing the two groups to see each other as people rather than just convenient allies. The dark side of the first Thanksgiving. While there was much to be thankful for, and the feast was a time of celebration, it also highlighted the cultural gap between the Pilgrims and the Native Americans. For the Pilgrims, this feast was an expression of gratitude to their God for providing a successful harvest, and to the Wampanoag for their support. For the Wampanoag, sharing food was an important part of their culture, a way of honoring relationships. For Massasoit, participating in the feast was a strategic move and a gesture of goodwill. His people had endured massive suffering from diseases introduced by earlier European explorers, and their population had dwindled. Massasoit's role in the Pilgrim success was primarily motivated by his desire to secure his people's future in a rapidly changing world. Although the feast is often remembered as a moment of harmony, viewing it within its broader historical context provides valuable insight. The peaceful alliance between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag was short-lived, compared to the centuries of conflict and displacement that followed for native tribes as more Europeans arrived. The first Thanksgiving was a rare moment of unity that would not last, and it was soon to be overshadowed by the colonization and conflicts that followed. For those few days, though, the groups found common ground. They shared food, companionship, and maybe a sense of relief knowing that they were stronger together.
And that's what the scripture is talking about. They came, humbled themselves down, made alliances with the natives. They did all of that till their numbers got up. Once more and more of them started coming over here, that changed. That changed.
If only temporarily. While the first Thanksgiving isn't the purely joyful occasion we often think of, it was a symbol of hope and a rare moment of peace in an otherwise conflict-riddled history. The aftermath and legacy of the first Thanksgiving. The peace between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag did not last forever. As more European settlers arrived, tensions grew. The original alliance between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag people began to break down under immense pressure from things like land disputes and competition for resources. The settlers' relationship with the indigenous people shifted as the colony expanded. The Pilgrims' descendants and later settlers saw the land as theirs to cultivate and populate, often disrespected.
That's what Donald Trump said. It's theirs, and they make no apologies for it. They tame the continent and make no apologies for it.
The Wampanoag people and other tribes. This led to a series of conflicts, culminating in King Philip's War, a devastating conflict between the Native American tribes and the New England colonists that lasted from 1675 to 1678.
How many of you guys know about the King Philip's War? Did you learn about that in school? They tell you? No. And if Donald Trump has his way, your children will never know if you don't tell them.
It was one of the bloodiest conflicts in American history, claiming thousands of lives on both sides and leaving a permanent scar on the relationship between the indigenous people and the European settlers. The Wampanoag and their allies faced displacement, death, and a complete upheaval of their way of life. This war casts a shadow on the first Thanksgiving. In light of the suffering that was to come, the feast seems far less significant. Despite the complex and sometimes dark history surrounding Thanksgiving.
I'm going to end that right there, but what you guys need to see is that coming and humbling themselves and going crouching is your Thanksgiving. It seemed like everything was good. They had games. They were, having camaraderie. Everything was good for a couple of days. How the saying go? Everything was good just a week ago. That's your Thanksgiving. That's your Thanksgiving. And now, in retrospect, the Native Americans actually look back and they remember these words and they're pricked with it. They should have never trusted their enemies, ever. Let's continue on. This is from a reenactment right down in Union Square. That took place of a slave auction right down in New York City. I don't know when this was, but this was done on a Black Friday. I believe this was in 2016. I could be wrong, but yes. You had slaves that would celebrate Thanksgiving one day on the plantations with their master because they were forced. And the very next day, your wife could be sold to another plantation. Your children could be taken away from you. The very next day. And that literally happened to some people. Check this out.
Gather around as advertised. The Black Friday.
So now, if you've been to New York and you've been to Union Square, you know that this would be a spectacle to see. So look at all the white people looking around. They don't like this. This makes them uncomfortable. This is what Donald Trump is talking about. This makes them uncomfortable to have this conversation. They don't want to remember this.
Fine cargo, healthy slaves. Fine cargo, black slaves for auction today. Dr. Johnson here, one of our famous veterinarians in the area. We're going to check out these slaves. Assure you they're fine. Go ahead, Dr. Johnson.
I will do that. Thank you very much, Mr. Tennant. I might say that this is a beautiful day for an auction. We got some fine stock here. Fine stock. You got some strong boy there. Look at that. Work all day long.
See the white folks, they don't like that. That doesn't make them feel comfortable. Those are your Trump supporters. Like, we got to get rid of this critical race stuff, man.
This boy, he came over the plantation. He was a little trouble, but now he's all right with himself. Ain't that right, boy? You're all right with yourself. Yes, sir. Right. No more problems with him, Mr. Patek. Oh, you got a fine young lady here.
Hey, Karen.
Your child man having a cooking, cleaning, does everything, right? We got Jemima here. Jemima? That's right. Now, we took her over. A farm she's been working over 17 years, right? Now, you never had no problem, man. Did you? No, she did. She got no.
Just like the Native Americans, the so-called Black Americans, the West Indians, the Haitians, all were slaves. And this is replete throughout history. And of course, they want us to forget this. They don't want us to talk about this. That's the point. So let's read this article real quick. We're not going to read the whole thing, but let's read this article real quick from the Tennessee Tribune. It's called "Why African Americans Are Still Holding On to Thanksgiving." So let's come out and let's go over here. This article was written November 25th of 2020. It says many American families, including African Americans, will today gather around their dinner tables to celebrate what is believed to be a joyful feast between Pilgrims, Native Americans, even though Many have given different meanings to the holiday due to its dark history described by some historians. And Donald Trump wants us to forget about the dark history. He wants to do away with critical race theory, to look at Thanksgiving critically and admit and acknowledge how dark the history really is around it. Essentially, Thanksgiving is celebrated to give thanks for the fruits of the previous harvest. In America, the celebration dates back to 1621, when the harvest was celebrated by the Pilgrims, who had sailed from England on the ship Mayflower in September 1620, and now were settlers at Plymouth Colony in what's now called Massachusetts. Others accounts debunk any sort of happy feast between the Pilgrims and Native Americans at the time, and rather describe the situation as white colonists who invaded their land, claimed it as their own, which Donald Trump said they're not apologizing for, and slaughtered the indigenous people of the land in what is called the Pequot War between the settlers and the natives. It is recorded that in the year 1637, Massachusetts colony governor John Winthrop declared Thanksgiving to celebrate the safe return of the colonist volunteers who had left for war against the Pequot Indians. This war resulted in a massacre of about 700 natives. So in 1637, right, this is 16 years after this Thanksgiving, in 1637, this governor of the same state of Massachusetts declared a day of Thanksgiving that the Pilgrims slaughtered 700 natives. Let's keep reading. All these happened at about the same time of slavery, where the earliest ships of African slaves arrived in America. Although Thanksgiving is linked to struggles and massacre that these Africans endured in early American history, they embraced the celebration even during slavery. I'm going to skip that and come to the next paragraph. Since their masters allowed them to celebrate the day, the slaves who worked in the fields usually went out to catch wild game for their family and close friends, while the women would prepare cornmeal cakes or pone cakes to go along with the game. The house slaves had it better than the field slaves, as house slaves feasted on the leftovers from the main house, and after the slave owners finished their meals, I'll skip that. Generally speaking, Thanksgiving for most blacks was along the Christian faith. Throughout black churches in antebellum America, pastors would openly preach against slavery, the struggles of black people, with hopes that their troubles would cease in the near future. Despite their worries and struggles, the slaves were continued to give thanks. Let's read this right here. Meanwhile, slaves took advantage of Thanksgiving to escape, as their slave masters often far away from them, and some also gave their slaves opportunities to participate in various holiday traditions. Work was suspended for slaves to celebrate and visit their spouses and children who were owned by different masters, therefore living on other properties. And this is important right here, because this is kind of not completely, this is kind of where the tradition comes about the whole family coming together, especially in our community, right? Because you could be a slave on the Johnson plantation, but your wife and children could be sold to the Reynolds plantation. And Thanksgiving was the one time of year where you were allowed to go to your family. If you had one master, your wife was on another plantation with the children, you were allowed to go and be a family for that day. And that is where the tradition stems from to a large degree. And that has been passed down from generation to generation to generation. And we have now begun to view this day as our day, as though we're a part of this, when in fact, this was really one of the only days of rest or respite that we would have where we didn't endure the hardships of slavery. That's why we embraced it originally. Now, the majority of our people have brought into the holiday, the fake holiday, as though it's their own. And that's the way the white man wants to keep it. And the only way he's able to keep it that way is not to teach the true history behind the holiday, not to teach the true history behind what went on with the natives, and not to teach the true history of what was going on with the slaves on the plantation during these days, what position that we were in, and how some of us the day after would be sold. So we were still in slavery. We were still oppressed. They don't want this history to get out there. But it's important that we continue to proliferate this history and teach it as often as we can. That's why I just did this impromptu class. I wasn't even going to do a class today because I said to myself, I was like, I taught this PowerPoint, the other PowerPoint I'm going to show you guys in a minute, I taught it last year. So I didn't want to repeat it again. But I said to myself, I'm like, even if it's 20 people, whatever, I need to do the class because we need to continually talk about these things. We cannot let days like this go by without talking about these things, because most of our people are going to be tuned in a couple of hours to watch the Thanksgiving Day football game. That's what they care about. They don't care about this history. They don't care about it. So we have to care about it. We have to teach our children this history. That's our job. All right, coming back. I'm going to kind of, what time is it now? It's almost 3 o'clock, so I've been going for 2 hours. I'm going to kind of switch gears a little bit, and I'm going to kind of go through this really quickly. Some of the slides from last year. I'm not going to go through them all, so I'm going to start from, okay, you know what? Let me stop sharing my screen for a second. Let me stop sharing my screen for 1 second, okay. Because I think I have the wrong PowerPoint open. So let me go and grab the right one.
Hey, priest, also, if it be the Lord will, we should do this on all holidays. You know what I'm saying? Because yeah, because it gets very depressing as an Israelite for these so-called holidays, right? We don't celebrate it. Like, I'm looking at my phone, I'm getting a whole gang of texts from family, people on the job, this, that, the third, and they think they doing me a favor by texting me Happy Thanksgiving. I just don't respond. You know what I'm saying? But I know as Israelites, we all going through the same thing, right? Your family who they not in the truth, so to speak, they think they doing you a favor by telling you Happy Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas, and all that foolishness, right? They're looking at you like, well, why are you so standoffish? Why are you not responding? How dare you? You know what I mean? And things of that nature. We need to do classes like this to strengthen up the people and let them know, look, you're not alone, because as an Israelite, you're peculiar. And the word peculiar means you're set apart, right? It just means different. So I think that we should continue this if it be the Lord will. And I will volunteer to help also, please. All these so-called, I keep saying high holy because my mind is stuck on it, but it's not. For all these so-called holidays in Esau's captivity. That's what
I'm. All right, so let's move on. I'm not going to be before you guys too much longer, so pardon me if I speed through some of this. I went over this last year, and God forbid if we're in this captivity again, then I'll do this PowerPoint next year again. I'll like toggle between the two, so it's never always the same thing. And of course, I'm always going to add new stuff in. But with that being said, let's take a look at this word called syncretism. What is syncretism? It is the combination of different forms of beliefs and practices. You combine two different beliefs and two different practices and make them one. That's syncretism. So Christianity is. Christianity at its core is pagan, is what it is. So the name Thanksgiving comes from, or was borrowed from, an English holiday. As I told you, the idea of Thanksgiving, the Pilgrims didn't just come up with that idea. No, that they were speaking and using terms that they were familiar with from England, where they were from. So let's just read the third paragraph right here. It says, during the reign of Henry VIII, holidays called days of fasting and days of Thanksgiving were introduced as a response to major events. They were also a retaliation to the large number of religious holidays on the Catholic calendar. So that's the origin of Thanksgiving. The name comes from the days of Thanksgiving that were being held in England, and they just kind of slapped that on their little feast that they had in Massachusetts. All right, let's go to the next slide. Be aware that Thanksgiving at its core has very pagan elements, as does Easter, New Year's, and Christmas. One of the festivals that is synonymous with Thanksgiving is a festival called the Harvest Home Festival. Harvest Home, traditional English harvest festival, celebrated from antiquity and surviving to modern times in isolated regions. Participants celebrate the last day of the harvest in late September by singing, shouting, and decorating the village with boughs. The calyx or last sheaf of corn or grain, which represents the spirit of the field, is made into a harvest doll and drenched with water and as a rain charm. The ancient festival also included the symbolic murder of the grain spirit, as well as rites for expelling the devil. A similar feast was traditionally held in parts of Ireland, Scotland, and northern England. These are your Western Europeans that are the foundation of what today you call white Americans that came over here. There were elements of these pagan feasts mingled in with Thanksgiving. Just goes under different names. That's all. Now we want to quantify that a little bit more, because I made a statement. I said Thanksgiving is one of the many names of Harvest Home. Harvest Home is one of the many names of Thanksgiving, I should say, right? So this is a book called Harvest Home Ingathering. And it's from a company called what? Pagan Portals. Pagan Portals. Let's go to this page right here. And I didn't clip. It's in chapter 2. I didn't clip the page number. I'm sorry. So if you guys go out and get the book, my apologies. But let's just talk about Thanksgiving, Harvest Home. I told you guys it's just another name for Thanksgiving. It's the pagan festival by a pagan book company. Here's what it says. It says, on Thanksgiving days, families and friends usually gather for a large meal or dinner. Consequently, the Thanksgiving holiday weekend is one of the busiest travel periods of the year, being a 4-day or 5-day weekend vacation for school and colleges. Most businesses and government workers are given Thanksgiving and the day after as a paid holiday, and Thanksgiving Eve is one of the busiest nights of the year for bars and clubs, as many college students and others return to their hometowns to reunite with family and friends. On both sides of the pond, the popular harvest celebrations are relatively modern innovations. Here it comes. But it doesn't take any large leap of faith to reestablish our old pagan traditions that our ancestors observed with enthusiasm and sincerity, aka Thanksgiving Day and all that comes with it is infused with pagan symbolism and rituals and synchronized with Christianity, and it's become one and the same. The everyday average person doesn't know that. But the pagans, the people that are into paganism, witchcraft, Wicca, all that stuff, they know, and they write it in books because they know what their customs look like and they know the history. The average person does not. I didn't until I came into the truth. I didn't either. So to celebrate Thanksgiving would be almost a form of idolatry for which I was supposed to be put to death. All praises to the Most High for Yahweh Shai coming and pardoning that. What is cornucopia? Cornucopia simply means the horn of plenty. It's an ancient emblem of fruitfulness and abundance in the 1590s. It's called the horn of cornucopia, or the horn of plenty, fruitful, abundance. Here's a video on cornucopia. Check it out.
It's Thanksgiving. You're sitting around the table and the food is coming out, and you look up, salivating, only to see a giant horn full of fruits and veggies sitting in the middle of the table. Why is this here, and what does it mean? Cornucopia. Maybe you've heard of that word before. Maybe you already know that it's the name for the horn-shaped basket. But do you know why? Cornucopia, also known as the horn of plenty, comes from Latin hornu, meaning horn, and copiae, meaning of plenty. Think copious. But it also has a long history in ancient mythology. For example, the Greek god Zeus was said to have been fed by the food-filled horn of the goat Amalthea when he was a baby. Another myth, as told by Ovid, has it that Hercules ripped off
Let's go back 1 second.
Ovid has it that when he was a baby.
Now, I don't know if you guys can see it if you're watching PowerPoint. This is the goat, and this is baby Zeus, and it's small, but he has his hand to his mouth with a horn. So that mythology comes from the Greeks, right? Let's go.
Another myth, as told by Ovid, has it that Hercules ripped off the horn of a river god in a wrestling match. Then the nymphs turned it into a cornucopia full of fruits and flowers to commemorate his triumph. So, the cornucopia has been around for a long time. Today, in addition to its use as in Thanksgiving symbolism, cornucopias show up in popular culture as well. Think the Hunger Games, where the cornucopia is used a few times, from the horn-shaped cache of weapons that's the center of the games to the national anthem of the land of Panem, called Horn of Plenty. Cornucopia is also
Hollywood knows, and they put it in the movies.
It's Thanksgiving. You're sitting around the table.
So let's go to the next slide. Let's watch this video about Amalthea's horn. And by the way, brothers and sisters, this is an image that says what? Happy Thanksgiving. And what's there? Cornucopia, a horn. That goes back to ancient pagan mythology. Whose idea was it to put this with Thanksgiving? This is called syncretism. They synchronized the two.
Amalthea is a mythological entity associated with the myth of the birth of Zeus. When Zeus was still a baby, his mother, in order to circumvent him from being devoured by his father, the Titan Kronos, hid him in the island of Crete under the care of Amalthea. There are still some disparities about who Amalthea was, but there are two versions that tend to be more common. In one of them, Amalthea was a nymph that looked after Zeus whilst he was a baby, feeding him with goat milk. In another version, Amalthea was the goat itself, who breastfed Zeus. It was known for its tenebrous roars, which frightened away all those who tried to approach Zeus's hideout. After the death of the goat, Zeus used its leather to create his aegis, which was an indestructible shield, later used as an offering to the goddess Athena. From the horn of Amalthea, Zeus created the horn of abundance, which endowed those who had it with the power of having everything they...
There it is right there. What's being symbolized as your Thanksgiving today was symbolized in the ancient world through pagan mythology.
Hey, Salakia priest, why am I seeing the same thing all over again, right? How can in the ancients, and it shows you the pagans is wicked as hell, and their whole tradition is foolishness. They so-called God King Zeus, right? he was a regular person. He had a mother and a father, right?
Mhm.
So according to them, Kronos is his father. So why is that? See, that's the thing I don't understand, bro. When people talk about us as Israelites, right, and the way we worship the Most High and stuff like that, and they make fun of us, but they don't know that their own customs, Christianity, is rooted in paganism, because the whole concept of Zeus and he was a baby and he was fed, it's all foolishness. I just wanted to draw the correlation to that, because a lot of our people, they talk about, oh well, you know what I mean, we worship idols and stuff like that, because they don't understand what we worship and so on and so forth. But they do the same thing, so it's all projection. Because I'm watching and I'm like, hold on, Zeus. So Zeus, they quote unquote God King or whatever, he was a baby at one time. So they doing the same thing over and over again, which goes back to the Babylonians, Tammuz, and Ramses and all that foolishness. So I just don't want that to be lost. I just wanted to bring that out.
And it's the same mythology the Romans had, because they said in this video just now, it said the goat suckled, breastfed Zeus. Well, we know how the Romans started. Romulus and Remus, they were suckled by a she-wolf. Yeah, same. It's all the same. It's all the same. Just kind of the story just told a little bit different, but it's all the same. So again, you have a cornucopia right here for Thanksgiving. And when you come and look up the article in the encyclopedia, it says the cornucopia became the attribute of several Greek and Roman deities, particularly those associated with the harvest, prosperity, or spiritual abundance. And since Thanksgiving was a time where the natives would harvest certain things and hunt certain things and sat down with the so-called pilgrims, somebody decided it would be a good idea to put the cornucopia as an image, because it's all related. It's all related. Here's an ancient statue of Zeus holding the cornucopia in his left hand. You guys see it? Here's the statue of Fortuna, which is nothing but the Queen of Heaven, nothing but Diana, just another remix name for the Queen of Heaven in the Bible. Ashtoreth, whatever name you want to use. This is found at the Istanbul Archaeological Museum. This is Fortuna. And what is she holding there? Cornucopia. See it? This is from a book called Polytheism and Societies at Athens. I took a screenshot of the book, and you guys can see if you're paying attention. This is Hercules, and he's carrying an old man. So this is supposed to be Hercules down here, and on his back is the old man, and the old man is holding a cornucopia. And sadly, your preachers don't know a daggone thing about anything we just talked about, because they make their Thanksgiving Day flyers come and have fellowship in Fellowship Hall, Thanksgiving dinner, and they use the cornucopia, which is pagan, on the flyer. Servants Harvest Day, and they use the cornucopia on the flyer. And like Elder Zahab said, they'll make fun of us and tell us we don't know what we're talking about. We don't know the Bible. We don't know this. We don't know that. And then turn around and go and make a flyer with pagan symbols on it. It's crazy. And yet more churches and more churches. It's not one church doing it, guys. It's a whole bunch of them doing it. And yet another church. This is the book of Hosea, chapter 4, verse 6. It says, my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge, because thou hast rejected knowledge, which they do when we try to show them things. God said, what? I will also reject thee. And that's why we ended up in the situation we ended up with. That's why the Spaniards were able to come over here and conquer the Mayans and the Aztecs and the Incas because they were down there doing a lot of wickedness. And while the Puritans were able to come over here and destroy the Native American tribes because they were over here doing a lot of wickedness too. Seeing, I will also reject thee, that thou shalt be no priest to me, seeing thou hast forgotten the law of thy God, I will also forget thy children. This is the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 2, verse 1. And Hannah prayed and said, my heart rejoiceth in the Lord. Mine horn is exalted in the Lord. My mouth is enlarged over mine enemies, because I rejoice in thy salvation. There is none holy as the Lord, for there is none besides thee, neither is there any rock like unto our God. Talk no more so exceedingly proudly. Let not arrogancy come out of your mouth, for the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. So the God of the Bible is a God of knowledge and information. Right? The Bible tells us the simple believeth every word. I'm paraphrasing. But a prudent man, a wise man, looketh well to his goings. The reason why I do PowerPoints so much, and sometimes it's supremely tedious, is because I want to show brothers and sisters that we have looked well into our goings. We don't believe the things that we believe because we just want to believe them, because they make us feel good. We have looked into these things and we believe them because we can demonstrate these things. That is not to say that every single thing that we have faith in, we can demonstrate. No one can. There is no belief system, not even science, can demonstrate everything that they believe. That's why you have different branches of science. We can start getting into the astrophysics and different types of things like that. It starts getting into theoretical science. There's a branch of science called theoretical science because they can't really prove some of that stuff. So every tenet of our faith we can't prove, but the majority of things we can. And a prudent person will look well into these things so that you can have knowledge so that we're no longer destroyed. And that's the reason why I do these PowerPoints, to show you guys these things, because the enemy wants to take these things away from us, this information away from us and away from our children. Many of us, we're already at a certain age, so they don't care about us because they're hoping in a short amount of time, in a matter of a few years, that we'll pretty much be off the scene. They're coming after your children and your grandchildren. So we have to be prepared to counter whatever it is that they're teaching our children, our grandchildren, and what our children and grandchildren are lacking in information. We have to be prepared to teach it to them. Everybody understand? We're about to come to a close in a minute, but let's just do one more thing real quick. How many of you guys ever cracked a wishbone on Thanksgiving? Anybody ever cracked a wishbone on Thanksgiving before? Thought it was cool, didn't it? It was cool, right? Yeah, that has pagan origins as well. So let's go to this article from Reader's Digest, September 26, 2024. The name of the article, is called, got all these pop-ups on these websites. Just to read their silly article, you had to deal with all the pop-ups. It says, Thanksgiving turkey wishbone, why we break it and how to find it. Here's what's to know about the timeless Thanksgiving tradition of breaking the turkey wishbone and how to win this turkey face-off. As strange as many of them seem today, all holiday traditions started somewhere. That goes for customs with deep histories like breaking the turkey wishbone, as well as relatively recent and completely made-up observances. Today's holiday traditions often have roots in pagan rituals. Celebrating the summer and winter solstices, for instance, and were later Christianized. There was that word syncretism, and eventually commercialized. That's what they did. They have Christianized paganism. That's what they did. One second. Sorry. Many American Thanksgiving traditions, on the other hand, take a different approach. They turn a dark chapter of the country's past involving white colonialism, manipulation, smallpox, and an attempt to establish a theocracy into a piece of feel-good folklore that has long been taught as the history of Thanksgiving rather than Thanksgiving's mythology. Let's move on to the next paragraph. Of course, one Thanksgiving tradition has more of a connection with specific food than Plymouth Rock, breaking the turkey wishbone, because everyone's favorite fowl wasn't even featured at first. Thanksgiving, the ceremonial breaking of the turkey wishbone, has its origins elsewhere. You have a reason to be grateful, though. We investigated the origins of the wishbone tradition, explaining how to find them and why we break them. Give me 1 second, guys. No, I'm in the audience. I'm in the audience. That wasn't me. Yeah, I was in the audience. Yeah, I was in the audience. I don't know why that would happen, but anyway, it's all good. It's all good. Okay. Let's get down to this part of the article here. It says,
Salakia Adawan, you may have Salakia Priest, Salakia Adawan. You may have to go back a few seconds or like a minute or two because the audience in Clubhouse, you had left and you was in the stage, so they didn't hear what you were saying.
All right. So we are on an article from Reader's Digest, and this article is published on September 26, 2024. It's called Thanksgiving Turkey Wishbone, Why We Break It, and How to Find It. All right, so I'm going to go down to the portion right here. The portion of the article that says, why do we break the turkey wishbone? And for you guys on Clubhouse, as I always mention, the link is at the top of the room. So if you're not doing nothing and you want to actually see these articles, you can see them for yourself, with your own eyes. But with that being said, I'm almost done with the class at this point. But let's read this real quick. It says, why do we break the turkey wishbone? It says, people have been eating poultry for a very long time, and there's no definitive origin story of the Thanksgiving tradition of breaking a turkey wishbone. But the one that has gained the most traction over the years involves the people of an ancient Italian civilization called Etruria and dates back roughly 2,400 years. The Etruscans considered hens to be something like oracles. So when they killed one, they take out the hen's collarbone and dry it in the sun to continue to reap the benefits of the prophetic poultry. Prophetic poultry. That's why they have you break the wishbone. You're supposed to make a wish and break the wishbone. That's where this comes from. The Etruscans would then take the wishbone, stroke it while making a wish. For a while, no wishbones were broken or harmed for the purpose of bringing good fortune or fulfillment. But about 200 years later, the Romans came to town and adopted many Etruscan customs. Thanks to Roman writings, we know that by this point, the Etruscans had moved on from stroking to snapping the wishbone, a shift they attributed to supply and demand. As it turned out, a lot of Etruscans want their wishes granted, but only one bone in the hen's body offers the opportunity. The V-shaped wishbone, which they thought looked like a human crotch. Sorry, y'all. Without enough bones to go around, so they doubled up pairs and made a wish, then cracked the bone. Eventually, the Romans brought the tradition of breaking a wishbone with them to occupy England. Okay, so we're coming up in time now, where the customs also caught on. And it later made it to the New World, courtesy of these so-called pilgrims. And even though they opted for venison, for what now was considered the first Thanksgiving, there were plenty of wild turkeys, ducks, and geese in this area. So when they did kill and eat these waterfowl, they continued the tradition of breaking the turkey wishbone. Because the pilgrims all are so closely associated with Thanksgiving, it didn't matter what time of the year the settlers broke a turkey's wishbone or that they never used it to bestow Thanksgiving blessings. Americans of the future would make the connection. As far as the word itself, the first known use of wishbone to mean the bird body was in 1847, according to Merriam-Webster, and the expression of getting a lucky break. Some etymologists believe this is a reference to getting the bigger half of the wishbone. So this thing goes all the way back to the Etruscans, from the Etruscans to the Romans. From the Romans, it comes all the way down to the English, and from the English, it comes to America. So the origins of cutting or breaking the wishbone on Thanksgiving is pagan. And that's the reason why I was telling you guys earlier about this word that's so important to know called syncretism. Because that's what most religions on the planet are. They're just a conglomeration of a lot of different beliefs all cobbled together to be one. And a lot of kingdoms would do that because if you are a kingdom like the Roman Empire, let's take the Roman Empire, for example. If you're a kingdom like the Roman Empire, where your empire stretches over a vast amount of different lands and different people, right? And people groups. These people groups all have different traditions and different beliefs. And so that can be clashes within your kingdom. So what you would have is you would have something called syncretism, where they would get together and they would take aspects of many different religions and many different people groups, and they would cobble it all together. And they would also merge it with Christianity, they'd cobble it all together, and then force everybody under their rule to follow that. You see the same thing in the book of 1 Maccabees chapter 1 during the reign of Antiochus Epiphanes. That's what the whole Feast of Dedication is about. Making all the people that were under his rule follow Greek customs. Stop speaking your language. Stop worshiping your gods. Stop keeping your dietary law. Stop keeping your law in general. Young men, don't attend to the temple anymore and follow us. That mindset goes all the way back to the ancient Greeks and comes all the way to today.
Crazy.
And we've been served that in this lifetime as Thanksgiving, and we think that we're good Christians and good Americans by celebrating Thanksgiving because that's what we're taught. And your man Donald Trump said he wants to keep it that way. What are you gonna say, Zahab?
Nah, because I just wanted to bring out Proverbs what is that, 3:31, when it says envy not your oppressors.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, why would you do that though? I'm talking about retrospect to our elders, right? From the times of the Maccabees, they already conquered us. So why would you do that? Right? You want to be like your oppressors. You want to be like them. That's the only reason. Because they already conquered us. So why would you want to do it? That's the part I don't understand. And our people follow it gladly. And you call us a cult? My man, you breaking a goddamn chicken bone. And you calling us a cult? That's crazy. You know what I'm saying? And something about me never understood that. I'm like, why are we breaking a chicken bone? or a turkey bone or whatever the case may be, and that's supposed to bring us good luck. But what about the Most High God? You know what I'm saying? So it's like it's I think it's envy of our oppressors because they're the ones ruling, but our people, they don't know the Most High set them up for a certain reason, right? And it goes back to what you're saying, priest. The Most High had the Puritans break off, come to America, quote unquote, and push their heretic and their foolishness on 10 tribe who was in North America at the time because we was going off. It's the same thing with the Romans, right? And the Greeks and whatnot. The Most High set them up to rule, but our people, we just didn't see that. And we just thought that, oh, this must be the way. That's why a lot of our people started following them. And they're like, okay, all right, this must be the right way because they're ruling. So therefore, whatever they're doing, it must be right. It must be sanctioned of the Most High. But really and not, but truly, it's really they are our oppressors, and we're not supposed to follow them. You know what I'm saying? So breaking a goddamn chicken bone, that's crazy. I wish a Christian would dare say I'm in a cult, because I'm gonna bring up all of this, priest.
So just in the brother read Proverbs 3:31. So yes, Proverbs 3:31 says, "Envy thou not the oppressor, and choose none of his ways." And then Proverbs 23:17 says, "Let not thine heart envy sinners, but be thou in the fear of the Lord all the day long." That's what we're supposed to be, in the fear of the Most High, not envying sinners. A lot of where what the hell is that shit that we do at the end? I got kids listening. Sorry. What is that daggone date? Kwanzaa. Kwanzaa is our people envying sinners. Black people had enough sense to understand that Christmas is not for us, so they made their own. You know what I'm saying? But it's still pretty much the same thing. It has nothing to do with the Most High. And it's so funny to me. I saw somebody post this on Facebook this week, that Christians celebrate every pagan holiday, but not one holiday in the Bible. Not one. They'll tell you, I see videos, and matter of fact, there was something that came up on my Facebook feed that said that the Christians are having some type of seminar that they're charging for, by the way, they're charging, where they're going to train Christians how to argue against anybody that says Christmas is pagan. They're going to give them resources, and I guess they're going to remix scriptures and give them resources. So they'll put all that energy into holding on to a pagan holiday, and out that same filthy mouth where they eat pork on Christmas, they're going to come and tell me that Passover is done away with, that we don't have to keep the Feast of Dedication, that we're under grace. With all that damn pork grease on their lips, they're going to tell me that from Christmas, that they'll go to their daggone dying grave to defend. Crazy, man. It's a backwards world that we live in, brothers and sisters. Well, I'm going to stop it right there. I went a lot longer than I thought I was going to, 2.5 hours, but I think that was enough. Elder Zahab, do you have any final thoughts before we get out of here? The floor is yours.
No, excellent class, priest. I just want to say that the history is very important. The more I study and I see and I listen, I see that history is very important because it all plays a part. You know what I mean? All the way from when you first started the class talking about King James and Henry VIII and all. A lot of people would, if you have the attention span of a goddamn goldfish, you're not gonna get it. You're gonna be like, well, why is the priest? But when you kind of put everything together, like it's like a big jigsaw puzzle. And when you put everything together, you're like, oh, okay, now I get it. The Most High is the one who does everything, and everything is it's like all connected. Every movement affects another movement. So I just want to say to the brothers and sisters listening, study history because history plays a part. And the Bible of all, you got to use the Bible to filter out through history, and you see how everything comes together. Excellent class, priest. All praise to the Most High. That's
all
it.
Praises to the Most High. I appreciate the brothers and sisters that were here today. Hopefully, you brothers and sisters were edified. As always, I always tell you, brothers and sisters, if the class made sense, just put 1 in the chat. Let me know that everything made sense to you guys. While you guys are doing that, again, I'd like to thank all the brothers and sisters that attend the Sabbath class every Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We're always here every Saturday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time on these YouTube channels. I want to thank all the brothers and sisters that have gone to the website or to the Cash App and have donated to the camp. We greatly appreciate it, guys. We greatly appreciate it. Since I have some of you guys here that are not always here, just a reminder really quickly, let me just do what I always do with the calendar before we get out of here real quick. Let me just bring the calendar up real quick and remind you guys of some things that are very important.
Brothers and sisters, while the priest is looking for that, I just want to bring this out. Coming very shortly in the future, we're going to have a fundraising event, right? Where if you would like to donate to Lines of Israel, we have a fundraising event where you could join us, and you could also share the link and whatnot. And I don't want to get too much into it, but what I'll say, it's a fundraising event where quote unquote, you see where, sometimes the church, they do like, a certain raffle or a drive or whatnot. We're going to have something, but this is for the greater glory of the Most High in Christ. It's a fundraising event, and it's a way where you could help us to help everybody else. And by now or next week, if be the Lord will, we'll have more information on it. I'm just giving you a heads up, like we're going to have a fundraising event to help our congregation, which is going to also in turn help our people. So I just want to say, stay tuned. We're going to have a fundraising event. If it be the Lord will, we'll have more information on it by now or next week.
Con. So you guys are looking at the website. Our website is thelinesofisrael.com, right? Just be when you come to where it says more, that's the calendar. Click on the calendar, and you guys can toggle from month to month. And so the calendar is pretty much done for next year. So I just wanted to make you guys aware from now. We'll be observing Passover the 11th of April of 2025. We're having Passover in the state of Connecticut. So far, from the information I've been receiving, everything is coming along nicely. We have our eyes on a couple of places, and we're also getting together the information of where brothers and sisters that are coming from out of state can stay during the Passover and all the details. So just stay tuned for that, but mark it on your calendars. If you have to ask for time off from your job, maybe now is a good time, 4 or 5 months ahead of time, to ask for that time off so you can attend Passover in person. We would love to see you. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So today is Thursday, Most High's will. I will see you brothers and sisters again on Saturday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right, for the Sabbath class. If you're watching this video and have been listening and haven't hit the like button, that's evil. Repent, believe the gospel, click the like button, share the video, and Most High will. I'll see you guys on Saturday. With that, I say shalom.
From the righteous ways, forgiving the Most High praise, from being saved, from the righteous ways, forgiving the Most High praise, from being saved. You went away, was led astray, like a runaway with nowhere to stay. No longer pray, feeling like you don't care if you die today. Believing the only thing that can save you is getting paid. Consumed by the material, living strictly for the physical with no sense of the spiritual. Faith is the key to survival, it's integral. You may not see it every day, but there's miracles that go on and so on and so on. If you would have met the old John before Johan, you would have thought I was way far gone to ever change. So now they look at it strange, like we insane. Cause our true identity we reclaim from the wicked ways we choose refuse to abstain. All praise to our Father, hallowed be thy name.
You will win.
And when it's straight,
You will win.
what you got to say?
You will win.
No time to play.
You will win.
I don't know where you stay,
You will
but for you I'll pray.
You will
Hope you find your way. It's only when it's strayed and deviated, the holy ways we desecrated. If in God's image we created, why is God's children so hated? Man castrated, humiliated. His nuts, his family eliminated. They hate our guts, treated worse than a mutt, but they still lust in the slut. All in a rush for what? Up in the cut, but hating on us. Big fuss, back of the bus, no respect, no. We the usual suspects. Hex, is it racial profiling or probable cause? Minor brush with the law, but only Christ and the Lord in the court. Jurisprudence supersedes, for sure. In God we trust, my heart is pure.
You will
But we still here today.
You will
We gotta start to pray.
You
Our enemies will pay.
You
But we still here today.
You
We gotta start to pray.
You
Our enemies will pay. We praising the Most High all day. I came a long way from them project hallways, from doing dirt to working on being saved. No longer confused, I broke the chains in my brain. I ain't living to seek the riches and the fame. It's more precious to have wisdom and a good name. No better love than to die for your brother. You ain't gotta ask twice, I'm here to ride for my brothers. Slaying the beast while praying to the east. We live in hell now, but soon we'll have eternal peace, where I ain't gotta carry the heat and the children are safe from police brutality, cause right now nobody's safe. Babylon will crumble and fall, we standing tall. The Messiah soon coming to earth and he conquering all. Let the wicked forsake his ways to see better days. Gather yourselves together, we the nation most hated.
You will win. 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 You will win.
Something new. It's that priest mode. It's that chef talk. Let's get it. Soldier, carry on. There's no giving up. And if we fall down, then he'll pick us up. And take us to a higher plane where we'll live forever and never die again. Soldier, carry on. There's no giving up. And